Welcome to The Cherry Picker, the horror movie podcast where we like to kill people, but not really. I'm your host, Zack Cherry, and with me as always is...
I prefer animated films and musicals. Eddie of Edward is Truth.
Do you really, though?
No, I like them on par, but I don't prefer anything. You know me.
And big episode for you today. We are finally coming to Scream, or Scream 2022, 5 Cream, or just Scream 5. What we want to call it. This is, we're continuing the pattern that we've kind of established here of like every 10 episodes, we cover a Scream movie. And I'm sure by the time Scream 6, however we want to call it, by the time that comes out, that'll be like episode 60, because this is 50. That we'll be able to do that. But also, this is kind of the 1-year anniversary, because this came out January 14th, 2022. So it was really kind of important for us to kind of schedule this to hit or like land after 1 year, because I think that's a good measure to see, kind of like how you respond to something when it first comes out, and then, give it enough time, or at least the year, to then reevaluate things and see where it lands for you. And I definitely have, a different perspective on things now. I don't want to say that like a lot of my initial takeaway was off, because I still feel a certain way of what I did when I first saw it. But I think I have a new ranking, and I know you should be prepared, because we discussed this, because I'm going to be asking for your new ranking. So
yeah, I was toiling over it, so I think I have an answer for you.
Should I go first or you?
We want to do it at the top? Okay.
Yeah, let's just get the ball rolling here. I think this is going to be a pretty big... We've got a lot to unpack, as you say.
Okay, well then...
And we're going to get ready now. We're not going to wait until we're an hour into to really start. Okay, you want me to go first?
All right,
okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay, well, before I believe I know what I said was from best to least best, because I don't think that there's a worst. I can't stress that enough for this franchise, but I would go 1, 2, 5, 3, 4 was what I said back in like earlier this year or earlier last year. And now I'm kind of like thinking 1, 2, 3. And then this is really hard, because 4 and 5 right now, like there are things about 5 that I really like and things about 5 that I really don't, and I'll get into it more as we go through the episode. And the same thing applies to 4. So, it could be one of those things that, like, depending on the day, like, and I hate when people say that. I hate when, like, you just want, like, an honest ranking, but really it's, like, that's how I feel. Like, 1, 2, 3, and then 4, 5 are, like, playing this, like, balancing act on a seesaw,
Well, what about today, though? Like, what is the ranking today?
Honestly, it could be 4 and then 5 at the bottom. But if you ask me on another day, it might be 5, 4.
All right.
Yeah.
Mine is not like that at all. In fact, I feel like I had this conversation with you once before, but maybe it was off pod. I don't remember. Because I don't think it's changed. I feel like I only know more about why I'm choosing this ranking. Yeah. Maybe I said like this is a tentative ranking, but I don't want to commit because I don't feel justified. I feel more justified now, just in terms of like it's an opinion. Who cares? But best is 1. We agree there, and that's it. Below that, I would put 5 Cream. Then I would put Scriforum. Then I would put Scream 2. And then I would put Scream 3.
Get the fuck out of here right now.
Right? God, you always take it so personally. You're such a bitch.
I know.
Anyway. You should get an Instagram handle with the word bitch in it.
Another one, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Okay, do you want to start with a premise?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we'll get that.
All right.
Get going here.
11 years after the last streak of brutal murders shocked the small town of Woodsboro, a new generation of killer resurrects secrets from the deadly past of yet another young girl, targeting her sister and leaving another group of teenagers to decipher who dons the ghost face mask this time to make them all scream.
I would have said 5 cream, but that's not the way it reads on the screen, so I call it 5 cream in my daily practice. But you know, the way Andre edits these together on the YouTube version, like there's always the title.
Yes, thank you, Andre. By the way, you know, get that out of the way. Who is our editor and does an amazing job. If you're watching all of the YouTube, the visual stuff, because he's getting all that together for us. But okay, I kind of wanted to ask you because we do have very different rankings. I guess I want to ask, like, what is it about the Scream movies that you prioritize, or what do you kind of glom to? That is like to use your words, but just what is the most important thing? Because I think that might make it a little more understandable to me or the listeners of, you know, why your ranking is your way and why my ranking is my way.
Right. Yeah, that's totally fair. I don't feel like I don't feel like this estimation or the whatever that motivates my ranking is different for Scream than it is from any other franchise. Like, the things that tend to rise to the top for me are the ones that make a strong emotional impact, have kind of how can I put this? Like, if not a consistent thread, certainly at least consistent incorporation of the qualities that attracted me to the franchise in the first place. And in this case, because Scream is my top version of that film, we have equal parts kind of like emotional teen drama mixed in with funny, colorful, witty, sarcastic characters who are you know, kind of conscious of the genre that they're in, or whether they're conscious that they're in the genre or not. That kind of changes from movie to movie. But certainly all those references and the landing. Does it stick? The landing is a huge one for me. If I don't feel satisfied by as satisfied by the landing as I have by what preceded, it just kind of leaves me with an emptier feeling. Not an empty. None of these movies leave me empty. Mm-hmm. But I leave a little less satisfied if I'm not going, yeah, you know, like as at the climax. That third act is crucial to me. I'm not saying the first and second act aren't, but I mean, because in fact, I'd argue the one with the strongest third act and the weakest first and second is Scream 3 for me, and that's why it's at the bottom. But I don't know. I just
it'll be interesting to talk about this movie's third act. In that case, if this is your second favorite, you did mention though, because you said specifically teen drama, and I wanted to ask you about that because 1 and 4 and 5 do definitely have like the teen element, whereas 2 and 3 are more adult centric. Like I mean, not to say that they're more mature, like there's definitely a lot of maturity to, I think, Sydney's arc in 2 and 3, but I like the characters they're college age, and then they're like, we're dealing with adults in those movies, and
maybe that's why 2 and 3 are so low on my list.
Okay. I just wanted to kind of get a better understanding from you for that.
What about you?
I think, okay, well, there's just to speak to 4 and 5 being kind of like, you know, playing this this balancing act at the bottom for me now. I feel like they both kind of commit these cardinal sins that aren't really like as prevalent. I mean, maybe there's a little bit of it in 3, but I feel with 4, and you know, I talked about this in that podcast, I'm sure, and I've talked about it ad nauseum with you off pod and on my main channel, is that I don't like how there's not really any solid character arc or trajectory in that movie. Everyone, there's a large cast and everyone seems to be broken up so we can kind of give everyone equal portions of screen time, and it never feels wholly satisfying. Just in terms of like one person's story, like Sydney or Gail, you know, in that movie, it just like from where it lands for me by the end, like with the very ending of that movie, where it's just kind of like the hospital and Jill's been shot, and then the 3 of them are just kind of left there to be like, we need a doctor, and it's just like, you know, and for the longest time, like that 11-year gap, it's like, is that how we're going to like end their legacy of just like, of just sort of like not really knowing and just kind of being at this this standstill? Whereas like 3 ended, you know, very impactfully, like you had already mentioned, of just like a solid finale for these characters that really tied things up. So I feel like with 4, that throws me. That's what makes that so low for me. It's just like how none of the characters are really given a whole lot out of the movie. Like, you know, everyone has like stuff to do that's great, you know, like Hayden and Emma, but you know, at the end of the day, it's just like it's not like emotionally satisfying enough for me. And I also think that the movie's very poorly edited. You know, I can deal with the like the look of it, you know, like it does bother me, but there's just a lot of things that logically aren't really adding up for me. And even like artistically, I feel like the editing is a little choppy if you compare it to the first 3, which were all Patrick Lussier. Whoever did 4, I'm just, you know, kind of like, you know, Wes Craven spoke highly of them in the commentary, but it just seemed like one of those things where just like, you're just being nice. With 5, which is kind of a problem that I have with 3. 5, it's the writing. It's
I understand that.
Yeah, and we're really gonna get into the writing here because it's really lazy in a lot of places. With 3, because you know, I've mentioned there are things in 3 that still like baffle me. Like for the life of me, I will not forgive or let down the fact that Roman calls Sydney, like that whole storyline is never properly developed or justified, and what like that really is the first act of that movie, of just him trying to track down Sydney. And it's just like, it's almost like, well, you had her number the whole time, why are we going through all this like cat and mouse shit for him to just call her anyway? So it's just like that I feel was more of an oversight. But I guess the justification with 3 is that they were really like under the wire there. Like Wes Craven was doing rewrites with Aaron Kruger like the day of, like, you know, it's like, we're shooting in 20 minutes, let's get this going. With 5, you know, they had plenty of time. Like, you know, they didn't. I don't know how much studio interference went on with like with Spyglass and like all the new people involved, but it feels like there was a healthy amount of time to just kind of put this together and, you know, do a rewrite or you know, a second rewrite, or just look to make sure, is everything copacetic? How are we kind of like treating the legacy and the continuity of everything that's come to this point? And other than that, because, you know, like I have huge problems with like anything to do with like stab and stuff like that. But even in terms of like character decisions and stuff that are mostly prevalent towards the end, and a lot of it involving the legacy characters. Not to say that like emotionally I love where they land at the end, but I just think like logistically there are things in the movie that they don't work, and it makes it doesn't, I feel like the stakes aren't there, even though like they specifically say like this movie has stakes. It just feels like a lot of what they did was just doing it to kind of like pander and just like kind of like, well, this is what people expect, or it's like what needs to happen, so we have to do it. And I feel like there were so many things that they missed along the way. And I do rationalize some of that to the killers, which is another big problem for me, because I think that these are the worst pair of killers of any of the movies. And I always like kind of likened it, well, like, okay, if there's a continuity error there, I'm going to justify it in like these two are stupid and they just didn't think of things properly. But there comes a point where it's just like, how much can I actually kind of push off on the characters and not so much the writing? Mm-hmm. If that, I'll make more sense of that later, but just to be as long story less long, like these are kind of the issues. And I think that also the suspense is just not there. Like it's just like what Wes Craven was able to do, I just feel like, and again, I think that's a lot of the writing, not necessarily the direction, because I do really like what Radio Silence as directors did with the movie, but the writing is unforgivable in places for me. So I'll just say that for now.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me. Yeah, that's a lot. Let me. The first thing that I can think of in terms, because you asked me like what I prioritize, and actually something jumped out at me at some point while you were discussing everything you just addressed. But it just made me think. Another thing that I think jumped out at me with this movie in particular, Five Cream, was a return to, and I don't mean just like girl alone in the house and everything like that. Like that's all fine and good, but the way it was handled, the fact that like here we have an enormously gifted young actress, you know, getting a phone call and basically, you know, just interacting with a voice on the phone, and based off of the escalation of this conversation, my tension, my own personal inner tension as a moviegoer is building and building and building and building to the point where I'm very, very worried about her, and to the point where I don't want to see the knife go into her. And when it does, I wince, I gasp, and I want to cry because it's so fucking sad. And that's something that had been missing from any of the other sequels for me. I think the Scream 2 definitely had a great self-referential, and we went into all this in those pods too, so I won't dwell on it, but it had a great referential quality. It did have kind of like the tragedy of it when Jada's, you know, like screaming and everything. And, but it was missing the scary aspect for me. I wasn't afraid by anything in that movie. And the third one, we talked about that, Cotton, and then the fourth one, I actually was much more charmed by it, I think, than you were, in terms of just the curveballs it was throwing, and I still experience that when I revisit it. But this one, Can
I ask you for another ranking of what opening scenes? Because it sounds like I mean I can kind of gather from what you said, but I just so everyone else can get a clear
It's probably the same. It's probably original.
Yeah.
Five Cream, below that, Scriforum, Scream 2, and Scream 3. Yeah, that's how I would rank the opening sequences. How about you?
Wow. I would go 1, 2, 5, 3, 4. Because, you know, I hate the opening for 4. I think that if they had used the original, like, Jenny and Marnie take for 4, like, that would have made it a little bit better. But I hate all the stuff with, like, the Anna Paquin, Shanae Grimes, like, you know, just, like, the cameo stab thing. Because, obviously, you know, I hate stab. But
I know.
like, the cotton one is okay. Like, I think for what it is, it's, like, really well directed and acted. But it is very pedestrian, like it just like in terms of a Scream opener.
Yeah.
And I always feel like, and we've talked about this before, like I don't think that they should ever do an opening with a returning character. Like I feel like that's such a like cop out. It's just like to kill off an opening character, like, or a returning character, like capitalize on the fact that we as an audience already know them and like have them in the movie more. Like make their death like a Randy thing in the middle of the movie. Like that'll catch us more off guard. Because if they're already showing up in the opening scene, chances are they're going to die, as it's been
like
four
Adrian King
times.
in Friday the 13th Part 2.
No, exactly. Or like every Halloween movie up until like Resurrection. But
absolutely.
I think that I really like 2 because I think like that's so different. Like I love how unique it is within the franchise. Every other movie, like every movie other than 2 has been like the similar like phone call at home, and it's like I already saw that with with Scream 1 with Drew Barrymore, which was done to perfection. Like, I don't see how that could be perfected upon any other way. I mean, who knows? Maybe there are people who do prefer the Jenna Ortega scene, and she certainly does an incredible job. Like, she does. the MVP of an actor in this movie. I don't know if that necessarily means she'll be the cherry on top, but she definitely delivers here. And I think that even Roger L. Jackson, I feel like we forget to mention him too, because I think this is the first time really since the first movie that I really kind of like in that scene that I really felt like his acting chops and just like him go, because it was reminiscent of that original, like the Drew Barrymore thing of like just like sort of like the pleasantries and like the chit chat and like we don't know where this is going. Even like the way he answers the phone is like, hello. And it's like, is your mother home? You know, like,
and there are traces here and there where it just kind of like starts to veer into that question, like, what's your favorite scary movie? And you're like, oh,
I might even say like, if the original wasn't so iconic in just like some of the lines, like I might say that this is his best performance on the call, like at least in this scene. We'll talk about other phone calls in the movie, but I do think that like if they were going to do like if 3 and 4 did something completely different that wasn't like person at home getting the phone calls like and stuff, like I would have been chomping at the bit for like Scream 5. Oh, we're finally doing like they did in the first one. But just because it's like we've seen this every movie, give me something fresh. Give me like a Jada Pinkett in a movie theater, not that specifically, but just something different that is an homage to other movies in the horror genre. So that's why I
just wanted to be scared.
Yeah.
So, and it worked. And it worked again while I was screening it. I literally started watching Five Cream last night in preparation for this pod, and then I couldn't make it happen. So I just turned it off. But the whole opening, I got probably about 20 minutes in. And in the whole opening sequence, I was sitting clenched. So I started it over because I didn't want to just, I wanted to experience the movie and not, a fragment of the movie. So I started it over and sat through that whole sequence all over again. And oh my God, I was just, all of a sudden different things started affecting me. I think it helps I haven't watched it to death this whole year, This is only my, I think, maybe fourth time starting it, fourth time starting it, and then fourth time ultimately completing it. Yeah.
Fair enough.
And so there's still plenty of room and things to discover. Like as the years go on, who knows? But I can only go off of like what I'm getting out of it right now. And if I were to turn to any of these movies again, what would I expect to like what would I be turning to them for? And would it satisfy enough of the boxes that I like checked, having checked with, especially with this franchise? Because that's, you mentioned like, okay, can we just for a second, my God, Jen Ortega, I was like, I don't think I saw her in anything prior to this movie. And I just thought, what a fucking skyrocket her career, like where we were, where we were last year, given like this time this year, like with between this and then X and then Wednesday, which I still haven't even seen, but it's on my list. I'm gonna watch it. And it's everywhere.
Extremely busy. She was also she had a bit part in Studio 666, which was another movie released at the beginning of the year. But I've seen her everywhere. It's just like good for her. And I said this in, I don't know if I said it in the X pod. I've said it a million times before, and I'll say it again. She really is kind of like this generation's Sarah Michelle Gellar. Just in terms, like, more so in terms of just like somebody who just appeared, like you said, just like, I mean, she's obviously been working. She's been in stuff before, but as was Sarah Michelle Gellar, but she just kind of like had that one like big hit. And I don't even necessarily know if it was this movie, but it was just like everything lining up at the right time that like this really is the year of Jenna Ortega, Mia Goth, and Anya Taylor-Joy. Like those three, those are like kind of like my top picks. But she definitely like if it wasn't her in that opening scene, I don't know if it would have been as good.
just what goes on behind her eyes, like as an actor, like she has such an intensity that I don't feel is forced at all. Even calling it an intensity it feels like a byproduct, but there's a rawness to her that just comes right through the lens that I get. I was sitting while I was watching this movie. I also felt like when the camera came on Neve Campbell's face and was just kind of like overblown by, oh my gosh, look at that beautiful face. Like the woman just gets more and more beautiful as the years go by, and brings Sydney every single fucking time, I feel. Yeah. And particularly, that's one thing. Maybe ranking Sydney in these movies would be different if I had to rank her. But because I feel like 3, 4, and 5 are when I get my fully baked, like, yes, this is like, last act Sydney every step of the way. I get in terms of just like the dealing with it and the starting to kind of like, all right, let's do this again, regardless of where she may be in her life. There's always this sense of like, I have to, like, but anyway,
it's Michael Keaton at Batman Returns. The signal goes on. He's just sitting there in his chair brooding. And Sydney, I think you mentioned this before, just like, it's time to go to action. The ghost face signal.
But even just purely aesthetically, like just the way she comes right through the lens, I was like, that's who Jen Ortega is for me.
I actually
of the new crop of these.
I actually agree with that. I think because I mean, like, and we'll talk about Scream 6 a little bit in this episode of just where we think it's going. But I wanted to say that I think that of Sam and Tara, I think that Tara is more like Sydney, and that Sam is more like Gale.
I hadn't thought about that. That's really compelling, actually. Just in terms of, what that makes, because I got to be honest, like, Sam happens for me later. She's not set up as an incredibly strong character for me, and I'm not completely like blown away by the performance. I feel like it's fine in the beginning, especially. But just in terms of, I guess, maybe the way she deals with things, the way she sloughs them off and seems to have a little bit more of like an icy layer to her. Like she deals much better like on her own. She hasn't quite learned to manipulate people the way Gale has, but she hasn't really learned how to make her shit work for her. And I feel like that's what this movie is about, her kind of embracing her nature. But that's a really compelling element to bring up. I've never thought of that, and that's
Sam's gotten a lot of shit, like or Melissa Barrera in particular. Like a lot of people said like her performance is very wooden, and I think that like I do notice her maybe struggling in some scenes, but those scenes in particular are ones that are particularly again, not well written. Like I think like the big monologue that she has when she's explaining the exposition, like the backstory of just like the whole finding the diary stuff and like being emotional, like that's a very awkward and like clunky scene. And I don't know how many times like she like did that take, but it was just one of those things where it's just like this. I don't necessarily feel that like that is good writing there in just terms of like having to explain all that shit, because like there's a lot to like kind of go in. Like we just find out that Billy, she has this connection to him and all that stuff. So it is very outside of the realm of this franchise for one. Like I know especially when the writers proposed the idea to Kevin Williamson, because I guess they worked closely with him, and they're like, what do you think of this? Of just like having like a hallucination of Billy, like having Skeet Ulrich in there, and just like, it's crazy, do it, like that, like it's it's insane. It is sort of like it's within the realm of Maureen Prescott in Scream 3, the Sydney. Sydney. So it's old hat, but it's like it's a character, because we didn't really know Maureen before that. Like Billy, obviously this is someone that we know. This is an actor who is now much older, and they have to be de-aged to to appear like they're a teenager again. So the whole thing is awkward and just like the soap opera nature of like, oh yeah, like I found this diary and mom didn't tell dad and dad was right behind me and
Okay, well, I want to address two of the things that you're talking about here, because
right.
I'm totally on board with one, and I totally agree with you about the other one. I'll go with the thing I agree with you first.
Yeah.
That speech, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I just wrote down, weird confessional scene, because it never really struck me, maybe because I wasn't thinking in terms of, like we're going to do a pod, we need to deconstruct this and everything like that, and I didn't have as much time with the scene as I did this time, but so I got to sit there and just kind of like watch it. And the writing, I think, is the right thing to critique in that particular instance, because I'm not really sure, number one, what prompts that confessional from her, like why she feels like this is the moment where I need to unburden myself and share this with you. And because I kept trying to connect the dots. I'm like, so are you telling her this because you think, because you're the daughter of Billy Loomis, and you broke the family apart, you drew a wedge between the two, and okay, that's all fine and good, but why are you talking about this like after she's been attacked by someone in a ghost face mask? Is it all just because it like all intersects because Billy was the first to don the ghost face mask, or among the first, and because Stu did it too, but or is it, and that's why you feel, I just didn't understand what made you think the confession was going to kind of be the thing, the salve, the thing that was going to like soothe and ease what just happened to your sister. Like you literally did just kind of like drop a truck on her, and I don't really understand, even though I think Jenna Ortega's performance is great, she does the best with the material that she can on the page, I would never write that response right there, because even though it kind of makes sense, I'd be more like, why did you just tell me that?
Yeah. Her performance is great, but like the Tara response to that is just like, it all feels so contrived. Like we need and that's what most of this movie is for me. It's just like, we need to get people from point A to point B. Sure. And it's so much of that is hinged upon Sam, which is another kind of critique that I have against like the writing and the killers in this movie, because nothing that the killers do, other than like presumably attacking Tara, and I'm under the impression, my belief is that they failed at killing her, because we've had this discussion before, we've talked about this movie before together, and I think we agreed that like one way or another, whether Tara was killed or not, Sam was going to come back to town. Because she has to. It's just like, she's not going to hear like, oh, my sister died. Yeah, I'm not going to come back to town. Like, no, she's going to go there to like obviously take care of the remains, probably see her mother. Like it's a weird argument to make that she would just kind of hang back in Modesto and be like, no, that sucks. I got a shift tomorrow at the bowling alley, So that's real, like that and the thing with the inhaler are really the only two instances in this movie where the killer is kind of pulling the strings. Whereas I look at all the other movies with the killers, like everything that happens in those movies it's the killers. Like they're the ones that are like forcing Sydney into this game, and Gale, like this cat and mouse chase. And here, everything that happens in the movie, and I'm not saying this is a detriment to Sam, because she's obviously like a very proactive character, that she's kind of being the one that like, no, I'm going to like come at this. But it's also inconsistent with her story later on where she wants to run, because it's like to this point, she's been the one that's kind of really controlling the story, because she's the one that goes to Richie and says, we're going to go talk to an expert, Dewey. And that kind of creates this snowball effect of like slowly bringing the legacy characters back into the picture, that by the time we get to the end and you have the two of them being like, oh yeah, we planned this because we had to get them to come back here too. And it's just like, how did you do that? Nothing you did that's the writing. That's what makes me be so infuriated, because when I like with Wes Craven, and this is even on like commentaries, like even I remember in the Scream 3 one of just like him, and I think was it Marianne Madalena? Is that her name?
Magdalena,
the producer. They talked about how like, we would have so many meetings and we would like get together and just work out the logistics, because it was almost like they had to like reverse deconstruct the killer's motive and like their grand, like they basically went from like their big speech at the end and like, how do we make that all make a logical sense moving backwards, and certain things of like how this adds up and that adds up. And obviously Scream 3 is a tricky one because there was so much up in the air for so long. But, you know, especially with 2, you know, it makes sense when Mrs. Loomis, you know, confesses like, yeah, like Mickey, the whole point of Mickey is that I had to frame him as the killer. Whereas these guys, and I feel like, again, this is something in 3 where just like their plan is to frame Sam, like Roman's plan was to frame Sydney. And it's just like, it's such a half-baked idea that it did, like that entire final act, as much as I love that like Sydney and Gail are there, I never once feel afraid for their lives. Like I never feel like either one of them is going to die, because everything that happens in that scene, and I know I'm jumping way ahead here, but it's just like, you're outside of a house, you have cell phones, Amber comes running out, she shoots at you, and the killers already revealed themselves to you. What do? You don't call the police, you go directly into the house and, you know, take them on yourself. Which, I mean, like, that's, at that point, I knew, like, first of all, that Sydney would never do that. Sydney would call the police. Unless for some reason it's like, you're next, they had a cell phone jammer. If they had said that, I would have been, okay, cool, whatever. But at that point, I'm just like, I'm not scared for them, because I know that, like, oh, they got this. And then even after the fact, when they're like, oh, we're gonna frame Sam, or just like, you know, like, you're not the hero of the story, you're the villain. And this is going back to the scene at the hospital, which again I've talked about when I did my Who Killed Who, which if just the fact that they're in the hospital when Dewey is killed, and Sam is there, Tara's there, Richie's there, the police are all, you know, come there afterwards, and they're like, okay, cool, we were all there, we saw Ghostface attack and kill Dewey. This is what happened. And then at the end of the movie, so what Amber and Richie are going to be like, there was only one killer and it was Sam. And it's like, okay, well, how do you explain the second killer in the same space as Sam, like during this kill? It's just like, it's things like that, which, you know, I could attribute to just Amber and Richie just being really stupid and careless, which very well could be because they're presented that way. But I think this is just a case of like the writers not really thinking out, like they're just like, let's have it so they're going to frame Sam and stuff. And it just, this is where I feel like there should have been more rewrites. There should have been things like if Kyle Gallner's character is related to Stu, why did they kill him off in like the first 20 minutes of the movie? Keep him around as a red herring up until the very end. So you're like, what happened to that suspicious looking guy? And then that could have been their thing. Like, we're going to frame Sam and Vince as the killers. Cause then they're like, here's the descendants of Billy and Stu. And they're like, they're now trying to recreate everything that their father and uncle did. Like, that would have been cool, you know?
See, this is also incredibly cool to me though, because it really casts a light on another thing that kind of like I think divides you and I in terms of like what we turn to these movies for, because it always takes me back to the fact that you were the first person who ever introduced the concept of a Who Killed Who, even with the first movie to me. Like I had seen this movie, the first movie, so many times up and down and whatever, and I thought sometimes it occurred to me like, oh yeah, that happened and that person must have been that person, I guess. I don't know. I never really invested that much thought into it because so much about it was just the ride for me. Ghostface was Ghostface, and I just kind of accepted that. And when you find out there's two killers, oh, there's two. That makes sense. Like I never invested much more thought into it than that, and really gave the most thought of my entire life to this entire franchise when you and I did our Who Killed Who argument
episode.
You know? Basically,
go back and listen to episode 8.
But and I think another reason is because like there are a lot of things about like a lot of things that you're bringing up here in terms of like the logic, which I will not argue. I will say, yeah, I didn't even think about that, like about the fact that here Amber and Richie are planning to frame Sam, and yet Sam is in the hospital with her sister. Well, I guess her sister was going to be killed, and Dewey was dead, and Richie was there to just kind of like make up whatever story he wanted about what went down in the hospital. But
that's the thing. Like, how does Dewey even get there? It's just like it's so many coincidences. Like this whole movie is coincidence upon coincidence for me, and that's for me. Like that's why I don't feel the suspense, and that's why like I think that this is the least rewatchable of all of the movies. Like I will say that even trying to watch it the other day in preparation for this, I felt particularly disconnected. Whereas like, and you know, usually when I watch movies that I've already seen hundreds of times, like Scream 2, I can watch that. But every time that the Sydney Halley in the cop car scene comes on, or Gail in the sound studio being chased by a ghost face, like every time scenes like that come on, I like immediately my attention is on the screen. There are really no moments in this movie like that for me. I think that probably my favorite sequence in the movie is in the middle. It's probably the Judy West scene, because I think that feels the most kind of like Wes Craven-y, just in terms of like setting up suspense and doing it in like a very kind of like fun satirical way as well. Is that your least favorite scene?
Yeah, I was just going to say, because you were talking about like the suspense not working for you. And that is like the one scene, and not the Judy one. There's an emotional factor. So that's why it works for me. But with Wes, everything they do with the door and everything like that. I remember even in my first screening when I was sitting there in the movie theater, he closed the first door and I was just kind of like, oh, huh. And then he did the second one. I was like, oh, dear God, are we really going to do this? And it made subsequent viewings actually less watchable for me because that, again, like there's a sense of humor there. It's not mine. And you know me. If something's trying to be funny and it's not my sense of humor, it makes me kind of want to cross my arms and go, oh,
I don't want to say that scene is like comparable to like something like the cop car escape scene. I just think that that's probably, like, of everything in this movie, that feels the most Wes Craven to me. That feels like something that, like in one of his lesser, you know, efforts of creating suspense. Like that's what I feel like. Oh, cool. That's like a really like a really cool nod to him. But like there are another thing with this movie is that I don't think that it's paced particularly well, or at least structured in a way that that makes it rewatchable for me, because there's a very long first act. I think it's even hard to like differentiate where the acts begin and end, because there's so many scenes that feel like every time we go to that hospital, I feel like we're there for 20 minutes. And there's like two sections of the movie. Like the first one is when she's attacked, when Sam's attacked, and then it transitions to Judy's there and they're all arguing, and then there's the Sam Tara confession, and then there's the scene with her and Richie, and then the next time we go to the hospital, it's Tara, just like getting out of the bed and finding the body of the officer, and then Richie arriving and all that stuff, and then Sam arriving, and then them leaving, and then Dewey dying, and it just feels like it feels like Wes Craven would kind of make that feel less confined to one space. Like there's a huge portion of the movie that just feels like we're just kind of like trudging through like these big, long, blocky scenes. And it's that part, because then it's like now we go to Dewey and we're kind of like introduced to him in the trailer, and we do get like the reintroduction of him and then Sydney on the phone. But then we go to like the rules scene of like at the Meeks house, and then from there it's the Judy Hicks, like that scene that you don't like, and then it's just the hospital. So I feel like it doesn't
not Judy, it's the West. That's
Judy,
the one
okay, but Judy West, but it feels like a lot of it is plot driven, when I would have wanted, like, and not to say that there isn't that emotionality. I feel like the characters really do get respected here, like new and old, certain new characters, but I don't feel that the characters are really what's kind of dictating what's happening, other than Sam just being like, I'm gonna do, like, who's watching my sister? I'm gonna go here, sort of thing. But not when I think of like Scream 2, of just like everything that happens in that movie, like Gail, like her transformation arc of just being like Randy's death affecting her in a way like where she goes to Dewey and just like, I want to find this fucker. Like that kind of her turning point, and then them finding the videos and being like, hey, if we watch these videos, we might be able to see who the killer is. Just like things like that, where it's like the characters are kind of the ones who are like moving the scene, like the movie from scene to scene, not of just kind of like moving through scene to scene because now we have to check in on what these people are doing here. Or it's just like we've been at the hospital and now shit's gonna happen. Gail's gonna come back, find out Dewey's dead. There's gonna be this big emotional thing, and then they're gonna be like, well, what do we do now? Like it just, it felt like a lot of like that to me. And then by the time when we get to the last act, which I feel like probably could have not been as rushed if they had like kind of trimmed the earlier parts of the movie down and had the final act begin much sooner, like once we get to Amber's house, and then pay that off a little bit more, like make that a little bit more suspenseful by kind of like what they did in Scream 1, where that entire like last hour of the movie took place in that location. I think that probably would have worked out better for me.
Okay. God, there's a lot to unpack. And I still have things that I didn't even like address that I like mentioned earlier. Like,
Okay.
So let me say, because I'll just say the hospital didn't really. I didn't have the same response to the hospital that you did, and I definitely didn't have the same response to the West sequence that you did. But I did. One thing I wanted to remark on though that we touched on earlier was the Billy thing. And his apparition and everything like that. Aside from it being, because I remember it occurring to me like right then, like outside the theater when I was breaking it down with my sister and her friends, like we were all just kind of like unpacking how we felt about this and that and the things, the parallels we recognized. And that was the first, like the day of where I recognized like, oh yeah, because like it seems kind of like a curveball, but it's not the first apparition to appear in this franchise, And I was like, okay, so there's that. But aside from that, I feel like just in terms of tone, like it lends, you mentioned soap opera, and there is that air of like legitimate camp that is kind of like thrown in. And by legitimate, I've said it on the pod before, I don't mean like campy, like, Uma Thurman and Batman and Robin, what is this floor? And you two boys aren't going to fight over me now, are you? And all that shit. Like some people like it and that's fine, but I don't like it. I feel like intentional camp, again, has to share my sense of humor, and if it doesn't, it just feels like a slog. But this didn't feel like so much intentional camp, so much as just kind of like wonderfully choreographed camp, because I feel like that's one of the moments where I actually enjoy Sam's performance. Or not one of the moments, but one of the things that every time that she's kind of like haunted by her father, I'm like, yeah, I'm in the car with her, I'm in the room with her, looking in the mirror, and I'm just kind of like, this is so fucking cool. I like ridiculous.
It too. I like it too.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to suggest that I didn't like it.
No, I'm just saying I do.
Yeah.
But no, just because there's so much to cover. But and also just the fact that like there are a lot of things. Again, this is where the writing, I do agree with you in terms of like most of the problems I do have with this movie, because I don't think it's perfect, can be attributed to the writing. Like a lot of things get kind of alluded to, but not in a way that really kind of lands, that leaves only more questions. Like they bring up the fact that Sam like is on antipsychotics, but I think isn't it Billy who says like the antipsychotics aren't working or something like that? Yeah. So I'm just kind of like, so wait, is she on them? Like we don't know why she's taking them, because we know she had a lot of problems, but they all seemed to be kind of like substance abuse related. Like what else did she do? Like I want to know more about that. Like give me more of her backstory, and I didn't get, a lot of that. But again, that's another thing. Oh, because something you brought up a while ago was just about, and I think we've brought this up with other franchises too, about sometimes when a sequel is not like a fully formed movie, but it's more kind of like, just like a next chapter where a bunch of stuff happens and maybe some interesting things happen. But as far as like something you can like present to someone as a fully formed movie, somebody's going to be like, this didn't make any sense, or what did that come? That didn't make any. And I feel like this movie has a lot of things like that, a lot of things that kind of like are brought up, and then maybe
so are you suggesting? Are you suggesting that this is going to be part of a trilogy, that, you know, there's going to be questions that are answered in 6 and then 7?
No. I would never do that. After the Halloween trilogy, this latest one to come down the pike, I am not expecting anything to be paid off ever.
Yeah.
But I am going to say, and I've been through my shit with the MCU and the DCEU too. I've learned my lesson. I don't expect anything.
Yeah.
What I am saying is I do believe this movie, what it provides is a successful episodic for me. I feel like, as far as just kind of like being like, some time has passed, another killer's coming forward, here is what their motive is, and here are the new crop of characters. I feel like it successfully brings back, for me, successfully brings back the other characters in a way that I feel satisfied by each one of their presence. The original trinity, you know, of Scream. We got Dewey and Gale and Sydney, all who show up and do something that moves me and that makes me grateful that they're there.
It was nice that they also got like, each one of them had a scene together, like Sydney and Dewey obviously over the phone, but that was kind of like their goodbye, or, you know, like not knowing. Amazing, and then of course we have the scene between Dewey and Gale. And then, you know, finally, like Sydney and Gale together. So it's just like, I liked that we got to explore every aspect of that triangle, of that trinity, as you will.
But also the fact that, like, the torch is passed, like, you know, enjoy that torch. That's the line that Sydney says at the end to Amber.
That's her bitchy one-liner, because, you know, she has a bitchy one-liner in every movie.
That's her don't fuck with the original, and her just in case, and, you know, like, all of those. Anyway, I also feel satisfied by, because I think that's another thing that puts this over Scriphorum for me, is I think I enjoy the supporting characters in this a little bit more than I do, even though I love Kirby. I love me some Kirby, but Kirby is, you know, like, my MVP of the new crop of characters in Scriphorum. I can't remember if we made her the cherry on top when we did. Cool, awesome.
I think cherry on I'm just trying to remember going back, because I don't think we weren't doing cherry on top when we did the first one. So we might have to retroactively think of a cherry on top for one. But I think 2 we chose Gale, 3 we chose Jennifer, 4 was Kirby, and then stay tuned to find out. Do you have one for 1? We could retroactively do it now.
I can't think of that.
I would just say Sydney, honestly.
Sure. Why not? But just in the fact that, like, I really, really enjoy the twins, Mindy and Chad. Like, the people who survived, let's put it that way, are the ones who I wanted to survive the most.
I agree.
And look forward to seeing in the next movie. So that's good.
I also predicted that everyone who survived would survive. And I don't know if that was wishful thinking, because I hadn't seen the movie yet, obviously, so I didn't know if I was even going to like these characters. But I am glad that everyone who lived, you know, will be returning in. I mean, aside from Sydney, obviously, but just will be returning in 6, because I think that those were the characters that you probably had the most growth potential from.
Right. So I will say, like, on its own, like, I would never show anybody this movie as their first Scream movie. It's not kind of like an epitomal, you know, like, oh, this is the Scream movie to see. No, I'd say it's too episodic. You have to start at the beginning. But as far as, like, again, like, one of those torch passers and everything like that, there's a lot that I was so welcoming and so grateful to have these characters. I thought like I said, the Trinity brought back, and I thought handled with more care than I've certainly seen other legacy characters or even other previously surviving characters when they come back for a sequel. Jamie Lee Curtis, hello.
Well, you know how I feel about Jamie Lee Curtis in the new Halloween. So I think it does. It definitely says something that you have these characters, and especially Sydney and especially Gale as well, that there's this consistency to that. Like, every movie that they've been in, they're playing the same character evolved. Whereas, you know, with Laurie, it's like you can't track who she is. Like, she's a different, you know, she probably has a different zodiac sign in every fucking, you know, movie that she appears. She does not have the same personality in every movie.
No. They write her the way they need her to be.
Yeah.
For
And
the
Jamie is
story.
just like, sure, I'll do it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to try it this way now. I never played Lori this way before. Whereas like
Yeah, I
Sydney
played her
is
every
like,
which way. Why
or like
not?
Nev is like through and through. She is Sydney. Like she's like, that's why I think that Sydney is so much better than Lori. You don't have to agree, but
I mean, we already ranked our final girls. Watch our
Yes,
pod on the
we always talk
Patreon,
about
and
that.
yeah, find out how we both
The
rank
cherry
them.
picker
But
after dark. Yeah.
yeah, there you go. But no, but I mean, so the fact that there are now 4 characters who have survived who are passing on into this next movie is really, really exciting to me, because those are the ones who I wanted to see grow. Those are the ones who I was just kind of like, oh, the siblings, awesome, because Wes wasn't really all that interesting. He was another one who they kind of introduced that on the text, like, is Wes still bugging you, in that first scene where she thought she was texting with Amber and everything, and
Which she was.
depends on how you look at it, but I think we both agreed on that. We
Yeah.
disagreed on a lot of who killed who in that movie, though. But anyway, but the question of like, is he still bugging you, and then the introduction of the fact that like he's like carrying a torch for her, and everything, and so he's a suspect because he's probably secretly in love with her, and if I can't have her, no one will, and everything, and then nothing really comes of it, because we don't really get to see them interact all that much. But by this point, that's nothing new in this franchise either. Okay, they did it again.
Well, I just want to say, I want to segue into like the suspects, as it were. But I do want to go back to just some things about Billy. But if you had more stuff that you wanted to kind of get out, because I know you had a lot to unpack, let's make sure to cover it all before we forget.
So there was something about like I actually that was one thing that occurred to me when you were talking about it. Like they de-aged him and everything like that. Whatever. Those things seem to bother a lot of other people more than me. Like I got through It Chapter 2 and everybody was like going, oh my god, they look like monsters when they de-age the kids and everything. And I was watching, I was like, yeah, they look a little weird in some shots, but I'm too kind of into this story. And with this, I was definitely into his presence, because I didn't know he was going to be there. So when he showed up, and the fact that it was him was so gratifying. I would rather have a de-aged Skeet Ulrich reprising his role as Billy than some look-alike they found who's age appropriate to be playing, because I'm not going to get the same feeling from him. Only one person can look at her the way Skeet Ulrich's Billy needs to look at her, and I'm like, yes.
Scream is not the franchise that is allowed to recast characters. Same with Child's Play. Wait, Child's Play has done it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But not very not very often.
Final Boy.
Yeah. But like Halloween, like how many times have characters been recast in that? But
Right.
And now you're making me want like more like Parker Posey at some point, because if they can de-age Skeet Ulrich to come back as an apparition, I want to see like a new scene from Stab. If we have to do more Stab, I want to see Parker Posey come back as Gale. Like I want to see like a scene from like Stab 2, Gale, like Parker Posey Gale,
With like red streaks.
Yeah, like that. I mean, well, if they had like a scene from 1, because I'm just trying to think economically, because you can't do a scene with Dewey, because then you have to get David Schwimmer in, and then you also have to de-age David Schwimmer. Whereas like if you did the scene where she's as like Jesus, get the camera, or like when I say like move, like please interpret that as like move your fat tub of lard ass now.
Tub of lard ass now.
If that was like the Parker Posey or like the Jennifer Jolie like recreation scene of Stab that we saw, or something in Stab 2, and then we get the streaks. That would be magnificent. That's the only.
Made me just realized though.
What?
Sorry. It made me just realize though they were shooting Stab 3 in Scream 3, and she had Gale's Scream 1 look.
Yeah.
So.
I think was that like a flashback though?
No, you know what? I bet you anything she just didn't want to wear Gale's bangs. Jennifer. Like the character is just like, have you seen this haircut? I am not doing this. We'll just go back to the way I looked in the first movie. Yeah. Everybody loved me in that one. That look.
I mean, who knows? The only Stab that I will entertain is if they de-age Parker Posey and bring her back as Jennifer Jolie. Other than that, and there's a lot I have to say about Stab, but I want to talk about Billy. And I don't have any issues with like the de-aging or anything. Like it's whatever. Okay. It's fine. I don't have any issues at all. Actually, I wanted to say how it it does that thing in like movies or just like franchises or series where it kind of retcons the mythology, but not in a way that kind of tampers anything or just changes it, but like opens up a new door, because we now find out that Billy, while dating Sydney, circa Scream 1, was cheating on her with this other girl, Sam's mother. And it kind of like, it opens up this whole new like psychology for this character that makes him even more complex than, what we saw in that first movie of just like, okay, like who is Billy? Is he like secretly gay and in this relationship with Stu or whatever? Is everything like, is his motive really kind of rooted in his mom leaving, or is it more so just because he felt that Sydney was kind of holding back his masculinity or whatever by not sleeping with him, so he kind of he had to go somewhere else to get what he wasn't getting from her? And that's why, this other character now exists that is the result of Sam Carpenter existing. So it like opens up all this, like so much more exploration. And I know you specifically said like you don't want, you're not thinking of like trilogies of movies and stuff, but I feel that, that's just kind of like Scream 1, 2, 3 that I feel, and I do hope, I still want every movie to be a singular chapter. I don't want there to be kind of like crossover or cliffhanger. Like I never want to see a cliffhanger, but if whatever the story of Scream 6 is going to be, that it's again like kind of revolved around Sam's character, and maybe that's where we can explore that there is some more backstory to her and it is connected to Billy Loomis somehow, and that's what's continuing the legacy of Ghostface and these characters in 6. So I mean, maybe that's why I say they could explore of like, what was Sam's like troubled past when she was a teenager and she ran off, like who knows what kind of like happens like in this like large span of time that she wasn't around, and knowing that like she has these connections to other Ghostface killers and stuff. Like that's where things can start to get interesting, and you can start to unravel a backstory. So that's what I wanted to say, at least about that part of Billy Loomis. But there was something else I wanted to say about Billy Loomis and the meds, but I don't know if you had a rebuttal.
Well, go ahead.
Okay, you mentioned him saying, or just because we know that she's taking antipsychotics, and he says, oh, are they not working how they should? And what I really would have liked, and this kind of segues into my argument about suspects and the way that they're handled in this movie, is that they're very well, especially if the end game for the killers is to pin the murders on Sam, what would have been interesting is to present her as a suspect to us. Because the marketing for this movie was very strategic. I really liked the marketing. Like the marketing for the movie might have been my favorite thing about it, of just like how you have these posters of every character with the mask, and it's like the killer could be anyone. Like everybody's a suspect. Right. I loved that. And I felt like the movie itself, the writing, the story, it's like, no, this person's not a suspect. That you can like cross out like half of these people as suspects. It would have been cool to see, at least if they had kind of positioned Sam as a suspect, because of maybe more so a thing is just like she's an unreliable narrator of her own story, of just like, we see that she's seeing these visions. I know that that's not something that Scream has typically gone to. Like they kind of did in 3 with Sydney, of just like, am I losing my mind? I'm seeing my dead mother and things like that. And we know that wasn't how it ended up. But again, like Sam is a brand new character to us. We don't know anything about her other than what we're now seeing for the first time or what other characters are saying. So they could have like really played with that and got us to a point where by the end of the movie, it's just like, well, it could be this person or this person, but I don't want to discount the possibility that Sam is the killer as well. And I think that they really could, I mean, with the marketing, they could have set it up to a thing where, like, that's what I wanted to see, of just like, I don't know who the killer is going to be. I want to be like, even if I'm not completely surprised by the time it happens, I want to literally have every single person on my list at one point or another and be able to cross them off on my own, rather than the movie kind of just showing like, oh yeah, it's definitely not that person, because like, you know, either they got killed, or it's just like they're the ones who are like actively not, you know, like they're trying to find the killer, or you know, shit like that.
It's interesting because you're making me. I mean, I do think that you crave the whodunit of it all more than I do. Yeah. Certainly, yeah, of course. But you bringing that up makes me wonder if there was ever a draft where it was left much more ambiguous whether Sam was a killer or the killer or whatever, and if she didn't even know if she was having blackouts, and you know, I don't even know, I might be the killer. Because if that were present in any of the previous drafts of this script, because you know, sometimes things can get written and rewritten, and if somebody isn't overlooking the whole thing carefully enough, scenes can morph into things that suddenly don't make any sense. And all of a sudden, that complaint that I had about the confession to Tara would make so much more sense if Sam is taking this moment to let her know, I am so sorry, but I have to tell you about this because I've been taking antipsychotics. I've been having blackouts or whatever. I don't know. I don't think I am, but I don't know for sure that I'm not one of the people who tried to attack you, who tried to kill you, who did attack you. And if that would be her reason for sending her out of the room, Tara being like, get out, that would have been so much more effective.
And we do have that scene of her in the car with Billy through the rear view mirror. And I think this is where they really kind of like picked a side of just what they wanted to do, because his whole argument was hers, just like, you're going to find the person who's going to do it, and we're going to slit some fucking throats, or whatever he says, where it would have been if they had instead kind of positioned that to be Billy being like, you have bloodlust in you, and like, you want to like just focused on that, and not necessarily go after the people who are doing this, but just like, there's a killer in you, you know, like go out there and you know, just kill people, you know, not kill the people who are killing your friends. So I think that they really kind of drew a line in the sand there, where they then were just kind of like, okay, well, Sam is, you know, she's obviously not the killer. Like, you know, we can fully trust her story here. Yeah. And I just want to say, I'm glad that she wasn't the killer. I wouldn't have wanted to see that. I don't think that really works for the Scream template of like having a Ghostface killer who doesn't know that they're the killer or something like that. But it still would have been fun to play with. Because that's the thing. Yeah.
The other thing, though, that I think might possibly be a reason why they veered away from it. Again, like, it's introduced and then it's kind of like not handled very much. It could be later, but as of right now in the franchise, given what we know, I feel like there's also a dangerous line you walk when something as mainstream as the Scream franchise is. If you start just dealing with heavier issues, then the franchise might, you know, be what people turn to the franchise for, like things like mental illness and and dealing with it, and dealing with people who have mental illnesses as dangers to people around them. That can be a really sketchy thing, particularly in 2022 and 2023. I mean, do what you want, make the movie you want, I would always say, and then you know, deal with the backlash and address it, but be as responsible as you can, you know. But I think if it was ever introduced, I can understand why they might kind of want to get their fingers away from it, because look how many movies we have about people who are designated mentally ill.
I mean, I can see that, but that's exactly why I would say that I wouldn't want her to be the killer, because it's almost like an argument to be just like, I have mental illness. Like, I'm not a fucking psychopath. You know, I'm not going to kill people. But I do think that there was the only draft of the script the script that I've read, which clearly was changed, was actually the fact that Amber and Tara were LGBTQ, and they were girlfriends. They were dating. That was the whole thing. Like, that opening scene Tara takes a picture of her breasts under her shirt and sends it to Amber in a text message. And that there is a really weird thing, like with Amber, just like kind of like her codependency with Tara, like that whole friendship, which I feel like that's why like a lot of it wasn't, it just felt like they kind of like quickly rushed this. And I don't know if it's just because they felt weird about having a queer killer, or you know what the ramifications of that would be. I just think that like in general, like I don't like Amber. I think that she's a really crappy character, for you know more reasons that I'll get into later. But I just see that like that's not the kind of person that I just thinking of like why they might have changed it. It's just like I don't want that person to like represent LGBTQ. That might have been the thought process there. Just like it's not a good look if this is a character who turns out to be the killer.
Was Mindy gay too in the script that you read? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
Okay.
But that could have been.
Maybe they just swapped.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe that's the thing. Because I mean, like, there really hasn't been any LGBTQ representation. I mean, like I'm just trying to think. Like, probably the officer in
the officer in Scream 2. I totally thought about that.
I think he might be gay.
and
don't
the
ask,
subtext
don't tell.
of Billy and Stu, subtext of Billy and Stu,
Yeah.
and everything, which I did not get the first couple times I saw the first movie.
But not like labeling something. It's just being like definitively
right.
like this is they're gay or whatever. And then there's the stuff with Robbie, who we've already discussed in the last Scream episode, that he was just kind of, if it helps, you know, like.
Yeah, I still don't think he was, but some people do, and they're sticking to their guns.
So
about that.
so Mindy really is like the first real representation. So that might have been a thing. Like even though Tara would have been as well, I think just like in terms of like depicting a relationship and then like finding out that like okay, well, like one of them is an asshole and the killer.
And that's a very fine line. I can understand the inclination to be cautious around something like that, but at the same time, for me personally, I'm not saying anybody else should feel this way, but for me personally, I feel like that's exactly what we need. Is like, well, then why is I mean, I understand why we don't want to have stigma around, you know, LGBT relationships, you know, in movies that we're making, you know, this early into our kind of, you know, wokeness or whatever you want to call it, or just our inclusivity, you know, that's what I like to call it. But true equality means that LGBTQ characters can do anything that their straight counterparts can do without fear of consequence. And I feel like the sooner we can get to a point where a character can be an LGBTQ character and do something bad or be a villain, and people aren't going to point and say, oh, it's because they're LGBTQ. That means progress. That's going to be the real progress. I still love the gay Disney villains who I never thought were gay. And now that I've found out that everybody thinks they're gay, I'm like, awesome! I like them even more. And you know, in the resurgence of, you know, like with Gaston and Ursula and Jafar and Scar, you know, like all of them, I'm just like, yes, Queen. Like maybe there's a reason we were, because if you marginalize us, maybe we're gonna turn into villains. You know, I bet again, don't want to put that out there. That's not, but I kind of my inner. You know, marginalized boy.
I agree. No, I agree. I think that it goes both ways. Like you need to have heroes and villains who are, you know, representing LGBTQ.
Totally.
I'm glad though, like just personally, I'm glad that they did change that, because I do think that, you know, just to see that like Amber, you know, would have been this character that was LGBTQ and turned out to be the killer. Because the way that the script, because she was even like way more possessive of Tara from what I remember. So I just feel like it would have been not even though it was just a bad look. It just like I just really hate Amber, and I just feel like that would have it just like I want to like my characters, even if they're the bad guys. Like I want to be able to enjoy them, and I just think for someone to be that shitty and fake that it, maybe I would love to know the thought process for changing that, but maybe it's out there.
I definitely don't rank her as like a stew, Amber. I don't, but I do kind of. And this makes sense, maybe more indicative as to like what our rankings are, because I do kind of put her on par with Charlie, just in the sense of like creepy feel the whole movie, don't like them, but I can get into it for the movie's sake. Like I don't dislike them to the point where I'm like, what are you doing on my screen? Get up. I'm just kind of like, within the framework of the movie, I'm like, get away from him. Same thing with Amber. It's like, get away from her. She seems really... Ugh,
since we're talking about the killers now, like, should we just get into the, like, killer talk here? Because we're already here. We may as well. Like, because you mentioned Charlie, and I don't know. Like, I had my Ghostface ranking, and I'm like really inclined to, Charlie was last, and I could move Amber down one. I really don't like. With Charlie, like, we get, like, he's that incel character, we get him, but I almost, like, I get a sense of who he is. Like, there's a complexity to him where I feel like this is obviously, everything that, he was easily duped by Jill. That it's like, here's a very like sad, pathetic person. Like, we talked about it with, when we're discussing Friday the 13th movies, and like Nettie in one, where just as an example of like a character who, I can at least, I get a sense of who they are, that there's a person in there, and it's, it's not, there's not a whole lot of light shining on there, but there is a person in there. And I feel with Amber, and I don't want to knock like a performance either, but I just feel like I don't like the way that she plays it, Mikey Madison. Like it's this like hyperactive, like, I'm just going to be crazy for the sake of being crazy. And I feel like, that's a very specific archetype that we've seen in the killers. Like, that's kind of like the Stu thing. It's the Mickey thing. I know you hate Mickey. But where I feel like those characters, like, they have their own identity, and they play them in a certain way that we get a sense of them. Like, they're kind of their own thing. They stand apart from whoever their partner is. And I feel like here, these two killers are operating on the same motive. They're basically, each one of them I feel is like half a brain making up one, and it's just like they essentially could be one person. But where I feel like Jack Quaid playing Richie kind of like understood the assignment, like, like these are both like really pathetic, ridiculous, like toxic fans, and he like played that really well, just in terms of like, here's this like boyfriend character. He's kind of slimy, but he's also kind of charming at the same time. But by the end, it's just like, yeah, you're a piece of shit. And he's like playing it like, I'm a piece of shit, but I don't know that I'm a piece of shit. Whereas like Amber is just like, she's like that yappy little dog. She's just like, like, like that stuff. I get so tired of it. And people, there's a thing, like, there are so many like huge supporters of Amber. Like she's their favorite killer. And I will never comprehend that in my brain. Like
everything that you're criticizing about her, I'm not going to argue. I'm going to be like, oh yeah, but I think that's what I love about her. I love that she seems to be the epitome of chaos. It's like if you're looking at Richie, he might seem chaotic once we realize he's the killer, but she is. But then she stands across the room from him. You're just going to like, oh my God, it's the Tasmanian devil over there. And I really enjoy that element of her, because that's something we've kind of been missing for a while. Like, I feel like maybe if I could liken Richie to any other killer, it would be Roman, because I just kept waiting for him to go, "You just snapped," Because there's like in terms of like
temperament, like he's
kind of
like
I'm just kind of like I can talk calm for a while, but then I'm just gonna like get really explosive and crazy and everything. And it's not like the anger isn't as focused and threatening as Billy's was, and he's also not as chaotic as Stu. And he's not Mickey, and he's not any of the other killers. But so I mean, just the fact that, like, I don't know, like, we kind of get like the Goofus and Gallant of Ghostface killers, and I love how that's the fact. I love how unfocused she is. I love the fact that she is so without self-awareness or. Like, even in her own best interest, like, she will literally make a case to defend whatever the moment, like, whatever the moment commands for her to be. She will just kind of summon it up and be like, "No, please, I mean, it's not my fault. I mean, really, yeah, I did it, and I liked it." I don't know. There's something, again, the melodrama of it, because the wheels are really greased at that point. Like, I feel like the third act is just kind of like taking off and soaring. By that point,
it just feels like it's just like a killer, just being a killer for the sake of it. That's what I get out of it, because I don't see like any.
How is that not Mickey?
I just feel that, like, but Mickey is like he's psychotic. I can see the psychosis in him. I can read that. Like, here's a very disturbed person who, you know, is getting his kicks out of this in a way that, like, you know, he's like super intelligent. And, you know, you might not agree, but I think that, like, Mickey is one of the smartest and most manipulative of all the killers. And when I look at Amber, it's just like, I just want to be, it's almost like the Stu thing of just like, I just want to be involved in something. Like, I want to be part of something, but I don't even get that from her character. Like, outside of like with Stu, he's kind of like presented as this sheep throughout the movie. He's a follower. Yeah. It's just like, you know, Billy says jump, he says how high. Whereas like Amber, like her characterization throughout the movie is like this like extremely almost like toxic, like supportive friend to Tara. And of course, like, I do want to say, like, the relationships between the teen characters is not very well fleshed out, but I don't get it's just there's no consistency in her, and I don't. By the time she's revealed, it almost feels more like sensationalism, like for that big shot of, like, you know, shooting Liv in the head, essentially, just being like, I know, like, and I hate that too.
For me, I feel that she is boundaryless socially up until third act, and then she's just kind of boundaryless in you know, like you name it, in any particular department of human existence. But so again, that's why it doesn't bother me. Also, it really doesn't bother me how inept the killers are in this. I don't know, there's something kind of satisfying to me about the fact that, like, they really didn't seem to have the upper hand most of the time.
That's the one thing that I will give them, is that they sucked, is that they were inept, and it was entertaining.
Because even Sydney, like, notices it when she goes in the house and she gets to remark on it, that she's like, oh my God, you know, I think you're the most derivative ones yet. Like, I mean, same house, come on. You know, just kind of, and again, somebody who doesn't like that, or if I didn't like that, I could just label it a cop-out, like, just, and I have done that with other movies, where if you put something bad, or you make a mistake, or you just didn't fix something and you just put it in the script, somebody remarks, that doesn't make any sense. That is lazy screenwriting. I will give you that, but it works for me in this context. Also, I do like the fact that one thing I feel like they got down was that kind of like was a reflection of Amber's boundarylessness and everything like that, and her hyper defensiveness of Tara, was when she and Richie decided to accuse each other, because if the two of them are accusing each other, it could be either one of them, and it could be neither of them. So it kind of like makes them a non-issue. People who are focused on pointing the finger and then pointing the finger back. After a while, it gets tiresome to kind of like watch that. All you want them to do is break it up and then just kind of like go to their separate corners. So I thought that was actually kind of smart.
Yeah. I mean, if I could get into like more of the who killed who aspect of it, because I do think that with my headcanon and my findings, like, I think that I showed the math, that I think that, you know, Tara is the one that solely attacked, or sorry, Amber was the one that solely attacked Tara in the opening scene, and Richie had his alibi of being in Modesto with Sam, that then it was Richie who attacked Sam in the hospital while Amber had the alibi of being at the police station being interviewed along with the other friends. And that was kind of maybe the one brilliant thing that they did, because it was sort of like this thing of just like, as far as the police know, there's only one killer. And then it's almost like by virtue of their separate alibis, it's neither one of them. Cause it's just kind of like, well, I was, the killer was here when I was over here, and vice versa. So if we are looking at certain, like, they're not completely inept. And I will agree with you. Like, I like I'll say this, like, I like the fact that they exist, because to be a Ghostface killer, not every single one of them is going to be top tier. And again, like, there's the variety there that, like, everyone has their favorites, but I like the fact that there's these shitty fucking idiots on the list. And I like the fact that, even though that I think, like, their motive is stupid and everything that exists like that, I almost feel like it's necessary. Like, that's what makes this movie kind of stand out on its own from the other ones, because it's so niche in its way. Like, all the other killers, had a connection to either, like, Maureen Prescott or Sydney, or Jill with her, wanting to get famous and all that. Whereas like these guys are just like toxic fans that like there's diversity with them. It's just like, here's people who are just doing it, not because of any like specific beef that they have with someone. Although I could argue that maybe like Amber doesn't like Sam because there appears to be some tension from previous. But again, that's never really explored or elaborated on or like developed that makes her seem more complex as a character or a killer. But it's just like, we're just doing it because we wanted to make a movie. And it's just like, okay, that when, by the time this franchise, possibly gets up to like Scream 10, I can look back and be like, oh, 5, yeah, like I like that one. That's the one where the killers are, toxic fans and they're like fucking idiots and stuff like that. So I do appreciate the variety in all the killers. Like, I'm glad that these two exist, because they're kind of like my punching bags now. They're just like, they suck. And I think that it's important that they do suck so much, because I don't, and I've said this before, that I don't think that it's so much about how crafty or brilliant or like scary the killers were in this, but really how resilient the final girls were, that they were able to just clobber these fuckers. And like these two killers got killed more than anyone else. Like, they got killed like 5 times each. And that really is a testament to like our leading ladies, that they were able to do this. It's more so like, that's why I excuse it, because it's just like, we're showcasing the strength of these characters rather than the weakness of the killers. That's what I can take away from this in the end. It's just like, they've got this. Like, they deserve to have lived. They deserve to be in this movie. Like, I love the sisters, the Carpenter sisters, or Sam Loomis, as we can make that connection. the name lives on.
Oh my god!
The psycho name lives on. Yeah.
It's exactly like Halloween.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a little like Halloween. Also, okay, the case for, or did you have anything more to say about?
I probably did, but it slipped my mind. So we'll circle back if it comes.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you can identify all of that. Because I agree. That's the fun part in it for me, is their ineptitude. I also find a great deal of joy watching Mindy just kind of break down requels for us. It's become, I knew when I was watching the movie, I was like, thank you, I finally have a word for whatever this is, this era
or legacy cinema.
Yeah. But I do prefer the requels. Like, that's my it just makes so much more sense to me.
It's a portmanteau of remake and sequel. It's not quite one, but it's not quite the other.
Yeah, she breaks it down and everything like that. And I get that Randy energy from her. I'm just like, yeah, we got the Meeks family here. And it's your blood. And then, and again, it's maybe it's like shooting fish in a barrel. to pile meta on top of meta, to have her on the couch watching the movie about her uncle laying on the couch drunk out of his brain while she's stoned out of her brain, and he's saying, Jamie, look behind, she's saying, look behind. I don't know, I'm so gratified by it. I love the fact that the way we flip the script is she has the presence of mind to go, oh shit, I should probably look behind me. Fuck! And then duck out of the way. And then when because that's another thing about this movie that I deeply love is I feel like the stabs, not the movies, but the literal stabbing of the knife into people, I still flinch. I'm still going, oh god,
pretty
and everything.
Gruesome. Yeah, I think like it's got four. Like there's a case to be made for both of those movies, because like 4 really has that viscera of like especially like the Olivia,
the blood on the walls.
Like it's almost like a fucking like deli market spilling out on her bed. and then you do get the Anthony Anderson knife in the head and things like this. But there's definitely like the knife cuts in here feel very like you can feel it. And it looks realistic. Even some of the more like fantastical bits, like where Tara gets the hand. I almost feel like if this was a 3D movie, that would be like the knife coming out at the screen.
That's actually the one component of the West sequence that works for me, is just the stab itself, the way the knife
it was so
goes
slow,
into his neck and then pokes right back out, because it was slow, because it was new, we hadn't seen anything quite like that yet, and because it was personal. It was just so invasive, and because that's the thing, I think that it's scary, somebody like stabbing you, ow, it hurts and everything like that. But what's even what might arguably be scarier is somebody lingering over you as they slowly overpower you and just kind of like slowly sink the knife in.
Yeah.
Because
it's almost like it's happening so slowly that you feel like there is a chance they could potentially, survive this, because it's happening at a slow motion pace. But then when it starts to go in, even when it starts to go in, you feel like, well, it's not deep in, it hasn't like cut anything
he's not even like like there's no big bloodletting or anything like that. So maybe he didn't hit a vital artery, but I mean that kind of stab into a neck, who knows? But the the whole thing of being conscious, like that's another thing. I thought first time I saw this movie with Tara, and she is just getting like the knife just pulverizing her, just I was like, oh shit, honey, I'm so sad that you're such a good actress, I'm sad to see you go. And then when I found out she had survived it, I was happy because she's in more movie, but sad because fuck, she survived that. Jesus Christ.
We didn't really talk about how the opening scene like really kind of goes against like what our expectations are for the traditional opening scenes of just having a character survive. Although I did have an inkling going into the movie, mostly because of like promotional material that that she was going to live past that. So
and have another scene.
Well, I don't think that they showed any of her scenes in the trailer. I just, it was more so it was an inkling, because I tried to stay like, I think early on I knew production details, but I got to a point where just like I don't want to know anymore, and it just seemed like, I think that it was more so comes down to the original kind of like synopsis for the movie was about a young woman returns to her town after a series of attacks. It might have even been like her sister was attacked, but there was never like an indication to like murder. And then of course in the trailer for Scream 5, Dewey says there's been several attacks, but not to actually like specify that there have been murders. So I think just going into that, it's just like, so is she gonna die, or
or is she going to be
so I think
the initial attack?
Again, like that's just the marketing being very
That's why
disrespectful.
I didn't pay any attention.
Yeah, just being very disrespectful to fans, for anyone really. We also, in that opening scene, I wanted to ask you about this because when we cut to the title card, there's almost like this, like, I don't know if it's supposed to be dust or snow. It's like this, these like little white specks that are flying all over the screen, and we see it again at the end credits where all the faces come up. So I don't know. My take on that was that it was kind of like we were dusting off an old movie, and it was kind of like, you know, just all the shit flying in the air. That's what I got out of it.
Okay, for me, I think because I didn't even articulate it to myself, but I think all I thought was you shine a harsh enough light on any kind of like black surface, even if it's a screen, and if there's any kind of like metal, it's going to gather lint. Like there's just going to be shit in the air, and it's unavoidable. Like nothing is clean. That's all I got. That's as deep as I mind.
Interesting.
So, in the museum case, the display case of the movie title, you know. Yeah. Anyway, what were you going to say?
I do want to go back to, because you talked about the requel scene, because I wanted to talk about that scene specifically. Because this is another thing, going back to kind of like the suspects and the finger pointings that I really didn't like about this movie, because you have every character, like every living character or prominent character in this room together, and everyone is just kind of like flagrantly pointing the finger at each other and being like, well, maybe you're the killer. Maybe you're the killer. And I just feel like it's so unnecessary. Like it just feels so like written and fake. Like, you know, people, like if people are having these conversations in the movie, it's just like, it doesn't seem like you're taking this seriously. Whereas like if I go back to Scream 2 or 3, like especially in 2, when you have the scenes of like Dewey and Randy like going to get ice cream and just being like, who do you think the killer could be? That makes more sense because it's just like, we trust each other. And that's just like already playing on these character dynamics. It's just like, I know that you're not, even though we say it, we joke that like, maybe you're the killer, you know, but if I'm the killer, you're the killer. But it just showed like there was at least a familiarity there, and they were discussing the other characters sort of things. It just feels more organic than everyone sitting together in a round circle and just being like, well, maybe you're the killer. Because if like someone is the killer and you point to them and you're just like, you're the killer, they're not going to be like, you figured me out. I guess I have to turn myself in now, you know, like it's just such a, it just undermines the intelligence of the franchise, the writing, and the characters to kind of like to present it in a way like that. And that's why I don't really like that scene. Like I like Mindy's kind of like explaining the requel formula, but everything else about that scene, I hate.
Okay.
Other than Heather, what's her last name?
Oh,
Matarazzo, yeah. Seeing her come back as Martha Meeks, which was a nice touch.
Yeah, that was great. But to address like what you were talking about, that I just felt like that scene, that component that you're describing of that scene with the group and everything like that, I felt like it was, number one, expeditious because we have a whole bunch of new people who need to kind of like all be on the same page about what's going on. So it kind of made sense to me for them to like have this powwow with everybody. Because the scene you're describing from Scream 2 is between two legacy characters who survived the last one. So of course they're going to have a shorthand with each other as far as like this, you know, breaking down like, among all these other people, who do you think it could be?
But however, we also have a scene in Scream 2 at the start of the cafeteria where Mickey comes and sits down and he's just like, hey, has anyone looked at Randy lately? Like, I think he could be the killer. They're like, Randy? Like, no, he wouldn't harm a fly. And he's like, that's what they said about Dahmer. So it's just like, it shows that, whereas I feel like you're talking about like all these characters of just like, you know, the movie having to be expeditious and showing them all being on the same page. But the thing that I don't like about that is that we don't get anything, like, they're just there. we don't get anything out of them as characters because they're all like they're interchangeable. Whereas when you like look at things of like Dewey and Randy, that's character building, that's development there. Even with Mickey and Jerry, or sorry, Derek and Hallie in the cafeteria is like as little as we get from there. Even Mickey in his like aside with Sydney being like, why would anyone like the 90s is no time to be a hero? Like, why would anyone go back in that house? Like, that's what I want. Like, I want like characters just like whispering in ears and just being like, that seems, but that again, that's me. That's my whodunit heart of just being like, this is what I want. And you obviously like, there's different things that you gravitate towards.
Well, because I mean, another thing that I like the thing that you were talking about in terms of like if you confront someone, and of course they're not going to be like, oh my gosh, yeah, and I would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for these meddling friends of mine, like they're not going to do that. But what I do like is you say that because it's a different dynamic. You say that in a group full of people, and you have an opportunity in that room filled with people who you think you know to watch. Okay, what is your reaction to that accusation? What's your response? Like, what is your alibi? And then what is anybody else's reaction? Like, who else is listening in what way? Now, granted, the movie didn't necessarily hone in on that, or glom onto it. And I'm not gonna, I'm not. And again, like I said, like the weakest thing I think that we can criticize this movie for is the screenplay, and that is a screenplay component. Mm-hmm. Is it the best way to get this thing across? No. Is it maybe the easiest? Yes. It's one of the easiest. And but again, I would even attribute it to laziness, but at the same time, we got to get this thing going, and I don't want this movie to be 2.5 hours. So it didn't, like you said, it did not bother me because there were other things that I was, that I was following at that particular point. But again, then it leads to them all kind of like deciding, like agreeing that Sam is the prime candidate, to be the killer. And everybody seems to kind of like be of the same mind. Like, yeah, that makes the most sense. And I'm like, are we what, really? Like, wait, why? Because you guys know that Billy, because it's a small town, people talk, so everybody knows that Billy Loomis is her father, and she doesn't know that but why? So again, like underwritten and strange, and then she just kind of gets upset and leaves because she needs to, and the script needs her to. But I'm just kind of like, all right, I guess we're leaving the room now. I don't know. And
everyone just like awkwardly sat there and just like, okay, there's snacks.
So yeah. Right. But that's again, like just Martha kind of like being this grown up who, we last time we saw her, she was this like cool kid who's like breaking into like back lots of like Miramax Studios and everything like that, and and now she's just, this mom's like, okay, kids, got some punch and cake for your little detective work that you got to do. I mean, I don't know, it feels very Hitchcockian to me actually, but I will say I agree with you. It's not the strongest. I won't die on a hill for that scene, but does it bother me that much? Is it a deal breaker? Nah.
I just feel like, like it's not a terrible scene, but it's just like, it's a mediocre scene that is preceded by a mediocre scene, because we just talked about like the confession in the hospital, and then it's followed by, in your own words, another mediocre scene. I mean, you like the Judy part, but the West stuff. Yeah. So I just feel like it's just. Like, I like the West stuff, but it's just like there's so many scenes like that where just like the movie, it's like obviously there's a point and they're getting to it, but it's just like I don't find it like incredibly compelling. And I mean, at this time, I think that the movie does a really good job of moving on without me like being like, when's Sydney gonna I need them. That's the only thing that's gonna work for me. Like, I'm thinking about it, but I'm still more so like, I want to give these characters the opportunity to develop and get to know them. And I feel that like, obviously with certain ones, they work better. I think that, because I do really like the twins. I like Mindy and Chad, but they're just, what they're given is just like scraps. And I think that like, like Mindy does get her big speech there, and we see more of them later on, but it's just like I feel like there was so much more heart with some of them, that it's just like we could have got more, because by the time we get to the end, like the party, it's also rushed of just like, we got to go through the motions because like at this point we need Sydney to come in and like kind of finish off the movie, pass the torch. And just like all this stuff of just like Chad going out to the shed, and that like half of a chase scene or whatever you want to call it. It just feels like it's like modern day horror, where just like we just have to have it. It just has to show up on the screen. It doesn't necessarily need to be handled deftly, but it's just like we just need to do it. And I think like that mostly feels like that's how I mostly feel about the Dewey death scene, because that just seemed like a thing that it's like, I knew he was going to die. I mean, I knew he was going to die because I pre-ordered the soundtrack, the score, and I forget what one of the titles was. I'll tell you in a second here, but it was it had the strings from the dun 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 dun, dun at the end, because in the movie it's all like out of order, or just on the soundtrack it's out of order. But this thing here, I'll find it in a second here. It was called Sacrifice was the name of the track. And that was the track. And then at the end of that came the dun, dun, dun,
they can't do that.
Even like that, it was called that. By the way, the music is really good in this. I really liked it. I liked the sort of like the subtle callback to the Marco Beltrami when Sydney shows up. But yeah, that when I saw that, I knew for sure, just like, oh, cool. Well, Dewey's dying. Like, thanks for that. But I already suspected that he would anyway, because it seemed like it was one of those things where like people were already upset for some reason because 4 didn't have the backbone to kill them off, or it was just like it let them all live by the end, because apparently one of them needed to die, like not necessarily. And I've always said that like characters are the strongest thing about this franchise, and yes, like sometimes it's necessary to kill them off, but it should be done in a way that moves the story forward for the characters. Like it evolves them. And I think that's why like the Randy death is kind of, I can excuse that in 2, because that's what kind of sends Gail off on her upward trajectory to becoming the better version of herself, or the more virtuous version. And I don't think that what happens with Dewey here is devoid of that, because I feel that like out of all 3 characters, if someone had to die, it had to be him, because if Gail died, that would suck for Dewey, and I'm sure Sydney would be like, oh, that's sorry, Dewey.
She would hurt because
she would hurt because Dewey hurts, but they wouldn't have anything. Like Dewey would be on his own there. If Sydney died, Dewey would be hurt, but Gail would only be hurt because Dewey was hurt. But with Dewey dying, they're both devastated, and that pain brings them together. And just from this is writing 101. Like, it's just like, obviously you have to kill Dewey because he's the glue that holds those two together. And once he's gone, they now have to work harder to maintain that relationship between them. And that's probably, that was actually my favorite part of, I mean, like, other than like set pieces stuff or just like kills or anything, my favorite part of the movie, which still like tugs at my heartstrings every time, is when Sydney shows up there at the hospital after she's already said to Dewey, like, there's no way I'm ever coming back to that town.
Yes.
And they have that moment and just hug it out. And I think what's beautiful about that, because like you can kind of map, you know, we talked about this in past Scream episodes, of just like Scream 1, bam, bitch went down. Scream 2, slap, get that on down. Like, Scream 3, we kind of got the, hey, Sydney. Like, do we hug? You know, I don't know.
Yeah,
and,
hi.
And Scream 4, which actually we talked about, is just one of the ones, the moments that I really appreciated in that movie, was kind of like the unspoken tension between them, but just like, we're going to hug, but clearly, like, you're not that important of a person to me. Like, I'm, you know, more so, you know, Dewey's my friend, sort of, you're just kind of like here,
We're not going to sit down and catch up.
Yeah, we're respectful, and that's why I feel like this is the perfect place for those characters now, because like now they have something that really solidifies them for life. Because outside of like their lives in the universe of the Scream franchise, all they really have are every time there's a new serial killer that they're working together, or they end up together at the end. But they don't go off, and they're not like having dinner parties together and going out for dinner and stuff like that. Like they probably have nothing to do with each other other than, like, we even see in this movie when Dewey calls Sydney, and she hasn't spoken to him for so long that she's just like, Dewey, like, how have you been? Like, how's Gail? I think she knew that they were separated because she's just like, I'm sorry things didn't work out for you. But it just shows that like none of these people really like are close in a way that they see each other every day. And I feel like now that you know things have taken that turn, that Dewey's dead, even though Sydney's not going to be in 6, it's still just knowing that these two characters have finally come full circle. Of just like really like this solidifies their friendship forever. Like I now know that like even though they might not live on the same side of the country, or even call each other every week or even every year, that like when they're on their deathbeds, which hopefully will be in years from now, 50 years from now, they're gonna be like, I really wish that Sydney was here or Gail was here. It's just like one of my best friends, just like that I don't get to see very often, but that's someone who's important to me. So that's what I love about that, like them coming together, Dewey, getting the axe, because that just really like evolves the characters for me.
Right. 100% agree with you. I can't, I won't even reiterate things you've already said because you said them. So up and down, totally agree. All I will say on top of it is I also love just kind of seeing after they have this incredible emotional moment between the two of them when they first reunite and everything, and then they start to kind of go to work, they reassess, and Sid's like looking at Sam and decides to go over and introduce herself and everything like that, and Sam is so dismissive, and then Gail comes over as kind of Sid's hype man or hype sister, and just kind of says like, hey, you know how they say you always go back to the original? This is the original.
Well, she's like, what's your tone, new girl?
Yes, I love that, because it's just like, whether you want to or not, you're in this. We're not in this because we want to be. We're in I mean, back in the day, I was in it because I thought it was going to be good for my career, and she got yanked into it, and she punched me a couple times. But now we're in it because and Sydney even going over just like, I have kids, and that means I'm not going to sleep until whoever this person is, is gone. And especially now that they've taken out one of the legacy characters, it makes total sense.
And also we got that Mark.
I don't even want to.
I know you're not a Mark fan.
God. I mean, that may be one of my biggest. He's not on screen, so I can't put him in the cherry picker. And he doesn't really deserve to die, but I don't know if he's. I don't know if he's in the next movie. Don't tell me. But if he.
I have no idea.
But why would he be
if she's
Sid
not,
isn't?
but,
Yeah. But anyway, if he is for whatever reason, it's like, show me a reason why you deserve to be in this continuing franchise. Like, oh God. Anyway, but
it's just there's a lot of fan servicey things in this movie, and I feel like that was one of them. It doesn't bother me as much now because I do like the fact that like Sydney is happy. If he makes her happy, I'm happy for I like him for that.
Yeah.
I can respect him for that, and
but
and nothing
really
nothing against Patrick Dempsey. Nothing against Patrick.
No, nothing against Patrick Dempsey. It was just a lame role.
Yeah.
And I really I can't see a healthy relationship growing out of that. Yeah. But again, maybe it's not that Mark. Maybe it
could be a different Mark. Yeah. You never know.
It could be. It's a common name. Yeah. She didn't say the last name. So who knows?
also with
like still calling her Prescott.
Yeah. It's Prescott. And she still calls him detective.
Hey, Prescott! Yeah. But,
well, and I also wanted to say that we do get, like, between Sydney and Gail, we probably get the closest thing to an apology and forgiveness for, like, I guess, like, her mother. because it's just, you know, she says like, you know, I wish I'd never written that book. If I hadn't, like, none of this would be happening. And Sydney just kind of being like, no. I love the way Nev does that. She's like, no. You know, like, this is because of Billy Loomis. Like,
yes.
So just her kind of like, it's just like, it's a moment of humanity because, you know, there's, if these characters were less evolved or this had happened, you know, earlier in the franchise, like Sydney could have been, you know, if this was like Scream 2 era Sydney, she could have been like, yeah, you fucking bitch. You know? Like, but
or she could have just said nothing and just sat there tight-lipped and just been like,
yeah.
Well.
So yeah, just like, it's
hungry?
just more stuff. So that's why I feel like they were so respectful to the legacy characters, because they just like, they did them right. And I think that that's why, you know, I would still rank this movie so much higher than like a Halloween 2018 Kills Ends, because it's just like, these are the characters, we've been with them for all this time, and there's purpose for that. Like they for them being here, they belong in this movie, and they actually make a difference.
Yeah.
So,
well, and also the fact that you can kill one of them off, and that I can feel on the outside of it that it was the right decision, it was the right call, but at the same time, you know, without any kind of like references to the context of the other movies or anything like that, just within the framework of this movie and where Dewey was, it makes sense for him to be motivated to sacrifice himself at this particular point, because I can see a man who feels that his life is not even at a crossroads, it's at a dead end, and the only thing that he has ever really done that has, you know, kind of like meant anything in the sense of like extending other people's lives has been to show up whenever these kinds of murders have happened, and to do whatever it is that he can, even if it gets him taken out. Like he survived so long. And I remember when I thought he was killed in the first movie, when he came out with that knife in his back, and I was just kind of like, no one could ever survive that. Oh my God, he's dead. I didn't want him to die. He's so sweet. But, and then, you know, he went to live on to be the relatively indestructible Dewey. Yeah. But in this movie, that's another thing, a huge boon for this film is that, like, after he makes that decision and goes back into the hall, oh my God, and the phone ringing, and then the stabbing in the front, and the running the knife up, and then the stabbing in the back, and the running the knife up. I'm like, oh my God, this is gruesome. This is painful. And then to hear Ghostface, regardless of who it is, Ghostface knows who the fuck this is and says it's an honor. Fucked up, but yeah, you are. You know, like, you better say it's an honor. Like, fuck you for killing him, but if you're a killer, know who your dad is, son. You know what? I don't know.
Okay, it's good that you circled back to that, because I totally forgot why we were talking about any of this to begin with. But yeah, my issues with the Dewey kill, because it just seems so like, it's just like, we have to kill him, and great. Like, he needs to die, you know, like it's one of those things that has to happen. But I just wish that it wasn't so sloppy in terms of just like how like him getting distracted by the phone ringing. Like, I would have rather it been, you know, like, not for him being inept, because that's the killers are inept in this movie, and it's sort of presenting him as like, he knows the rule. Like, he says it, you know, when they meet him in the trailer, and he's just like, there's certain rules, yada, yada, yada. Like, he should be an expert on this. So there's so many things that he should know. But he does, like, the dumb decision of just being like, you go down the elevator. I'll stick here alone, and I'm going to do this. You know, I didn't shoot him in the killer in the head the first time. Just like, so it was one of those things that it felt contrived to get him to that point. Okay. Whereas if they had just found a way that the killer could do that and get the upper hand and have it be more of a surprise rather than just like, oh, the phone's ringing, let me just lower my guard for a second. And another thing that I really would have liked, because I think that, like, people have mentioned this, but I don't think that it's translated at all. And this mostly has to do with the character of Tatum, because I feel like they've really kind of, any reference to her, they really kind of like pushed to the wayside in any of these movies. And here, like, we see her ashes, I guess, like on his bureau. And there's almost like this thing of Sam just being like, my sister's in trouble. I have to go to the hospital. And it's just like, hey, my sister was in trouble and I wasn't there for her. So I'm going to be here for her sister. And it was like, whether people want to translate that or not, it was never really honed in on at any point where I would have, if something like that was kind of like spoken to or just, presented, then that would have made that so much more emotional, just like why he needed to go, other than just being like helpful, friendly Dewey who's, there in a pinch because that's what he does. So it would have at least raised the emotional stakes there, or just like, I can either spend time with my estranged wife, my ex-wife who I haven't seen in years, who's now back in my life momentarily, or I can go help this stranger who has a sister, and I've lost my sister. Like, there's things like that they had every opportunity to really make this more impactful, and they just kind of glossed over.
Okay, I mean, I'll agree with you. It could have been pushed to the forefront a little bit more and been a little bit more deliberate in terms of like his decision making. But it was something that was referenced in a conversation with my little group after the first time we saw the movie. So we did pick up on it. It was something that affected us. But I mean, there wouldn't be any harm in like pushing that a little bit more to the forefront. Yeah. Like, but I don't think that'd be like laying it on too thick or anything. But I do have to say the whole thing with the phone ringing and the issue you take with it, for me, because it's involuntary, it's a reflex. It's like, if a phone rings or if somebody, fires off a gun, or if there's a loud noise that all of a sudden disturbs you, it's like, it's an involuntary thing. So there's something to it that feels very human, and not like he's dropping his guard, but more like something seemingly, in any other moment in his day, that would have been one of the most insignificant things in the world. But the fact that it's an insignificant action leading to an otherwise ultimately significant consequence, that feels like tragedy to me. That feels, and I've watched Dewey die so many times. I cry and scream too every single time he slides down that fucking window. But in this movie, that's the thing, is like once he gets the knife in him and everything, and even this is another thing that I kind of like about the movie, and it is not, it's that weird meta thing where, as the audience, I got a strong sense when Sid was on that phone call with Dewey. She told him, the last thing she said, there's that little quiver in her voice, and I believe what she says to him is like, "But you take care, okay? You be careful, okay? Whatever." And there's a little like kind of like choke in her voice, and I'm just kind of like, she knows she's saying goodbye. She's like, he could, and at the time, I didn't even know he was going to die, but I thought like, but he could conceivably, like, this could be the last time you talk to him, and you know that, and you're not going. So I was writing that. Then when he says, like, what I don't remember what the line is before the elevator doors close, but when he's just kind of like,
Sam says like, Dewey, who gives a fuck? And he's like, I do.
Exactly. Chicking.
Yeah.
And so when he does that, I'm just kind of like, fuck no. And my little inner dread, is going on, because I'm just kind of like, this feels like they're setting up a final,
but that's
like
the thing. Like, it was,
moment.
it's so telegraphed that I just like, it takes the piss out of it.
No, but I was on the ride. Oh, see, I was on the right. I was just going, no. This, I think Sid was prescient about this, and I feel like I can feel it. So then when it finally happened, and the payoff with the like it's been an honor, and the fact that it was, as you said, sloppy. I think sloppy, like just in terms of like the bloodletting and everything like that. I'm like, oh my god, it's such a
How
mess.
about
this is so brutal,
I feel
and
like
I'm just weeping.
Do this podcast without bringing up the elephant in the room, which I guess is like everybody fucking going on about the logistics, or like the possibility that Amber, because that's who it is, could lift Dewey up off of the ground. And I just think this is such a stupid and tenuous argument that people make, because he doesn't get lifted off the ground at all. Did you do you see it no, the killer, we'll say, is on the floor, stabs him from that position, and then slowly starts to stand up. But at that point, like, he's still a head above Ghostface because they're coming off of the ground, but his feet are still like they're on the floor. And he he jolts upwards, but there's no.
He jolts upwards.
It's not like Little Amber like it's not like Texas Chainsaw Massacre like 2022.
No.
No.
David and Goliath. But no, it's not that moment at all. It's he jolts up because he's got two knives running up his body. Yeah. I know that. Oh my gosh, what a strange thing. But,
people see what they want to see, but it's like you can watch the movie. It doesn't happen.
It reminds me of like back in 2016. I don't know how many people were paying attention to like the debates then, but yeah, I don't know. You just made me think about it. There was a moment where like Hillary Clinton was fielding a question and she felt good about it. She was ready to answer it. And she did kind of like okay, and just kind of shimmied a little bit back and forth. Yeah. And my sister spoke to me later because she didn't watch the debates the night that they happened. She was going to watch them the next night, but she's like, apparently Hillary Clinton like did a whole shimmy, and I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, she did a little one. What are you talking about? She's like, no, the way people are talking about it sounded to me like she was going, oh yeah, and I'm like, that is not what happened at all. So I feel like that moment, if the people are like, yeah, remember when Amber fucking lifted him over her head? How's she gonna lift somebody Dewey's size and like throw him across the room? It's like, no, that's not what
I feel
happened.
like it's gonna
a bad
be,
game of telephone.
It's going to be one of the... Exactly, that's a good way of putting it. I was going to say it's going to be like one of those things, like, it'll be the Mandela effect in like years from now, where people who have been on that side of the argument will watch the movie again and they'll be like, oh, they removed the part where, he was like on a sword, up in the sky.
Or even to keep it within subgenre, I remember a huge argument that people would have with me all the time about Texas Chainsaw Massacre was about seeing the hook go into the girl when Leatherface drops her on the meat hook. And I'm like, no, it doesn't happen. They're like, yeah, you see it go right in. I'm like, no, because how were they going to do that? Like, they could, like, we're talking a really low budget movie. They don't have the money to like create like this prosthetic body that they're going to put, and they're certainly not going to stab her. Like, what are you talking about? Watch the scene. Come over to my house and watch the scene. And then on the rare occasion, like then later on, I'd have like a phone and I could just go to YouTube and so like, look at the scene. Well, it was edited because it's on YouTube. You're an idiot. Go home, watch your DVD, get back to me.
Well, I mean, if there's ever a person that I can rely on to show the proof and who will bring it up enthusiastically, I know it's you.
Yes, the receipts. Or like Jason Voorhees never runs. And that's another one. I'm just going to like watch the first 3 films he's in and then talk to me. Anyway, so people need to calm the fuck down. But but I cry. And then I cry. Okay, then I'm already crying. And then I see fucking Gale rushing and being like pulled off and everything. And it is so, again, like that's trite. That's been done 800,000 times.
Why are they holding her back? Who are they to hold her back? That was another
I think I think it's ultimately just because, like, they're in this now. That's the only thing that I get from it. It's just like, well, it's better for them than, like, some kind of, like, paramedics or something like that. Because at least... Because I think she would fight paramedics. Yeah. I mean, but these two people who have also, like, kind of been losing people and everything like that, or at least on the brink of losing people, and could still lose people. Like, I don't know. There's a good point.
And speaking of...
there.
Well, speaking of conspiracy theories, because people will think that it wasn't Amber, it was a third killer that did that. Stu.
It was Stu or Roman.
But another one that I've heard is that it wasn't actually Dewey that was being taken out of the hospital because there was the other officer that was killed. So the body bag was actually him. So Dewey's actually alive, and he's been whisked off to a private island somewhere to recover, and they didn't think to tell his wife.
That is some Jamie Lee Halloween Resurrection bullshit. Like, don't resurrection 5 cream.
There are people who, I mean, bless their hearts, who you'll see on Twitter or Instagram just have their theories or their their conspiracies or whatever, and just be like, this is what it's going to be when it's like Scream 6 or 7, and it's just like, you must never write a screen. Like, don't even waste your time, honey. You know, like, no one's gonna like this movie, and it's never gonna get made. And I feel badly for them, but I mean, like, it's just. Yeah. It's stupid. Stop being stupid.
There's no way you can put me through what you put me through and then bring Dewey back in a way that is going to satisfy me, that I'm going to be like, oh, he's back. I'm going to be like, what the fuck? Who's writing this? Oh, I'm leaving. First time I'm walking out of a Scream movie. God damn it. Also, if they ever go that route.
Just speaking of Gail, what was with her, like, her initial introduction? Because I felt like that scene was a little, I mean, not like when she interacted with Dewey, like that was all great, but like when she walked over to Sam and she's just like, oh, what's going on here? Like, did you know her? Like, that just seemed like really fake. I didn't get Gail out of that. Like, it just seemed like she's not going to go up to this random stranger and be like, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Like I'm like Gail, right? What she's just like, what? Riley, excuse me. Like, Gail would just like, she would make a beeline. Really?
No, I ate that shit because I also know, like, she's there, of course. I mean, she's there, of course, to like find out what's going on and everything like that. But she's also just, it's a little more personal now. She's not on the case so much as she's reconvening. You know, like I don't know. I kind of liked. I thought it was a graceful way for her to kind of like make a re-entry into the franchise. It made me happy.
My favorite part of that, like unintentionally favorite part of that, is like when Sam goes running off and she's like, I gotta go to the hospital, and Dewey like makes that decision to like go with her. Yeah. But he kind of like looks over and Gail's like doing her report, and you see like the back of her, and you just hear she's like, I'm here in Woodsboro where Sheriff Judy Hicks has just been brutally stabbed in front, like, and you're just like, what the fuck? What kind of like news report is that? It just seemed a little too comical for me. Like, I loved it. Like, it was just like ridiculous because it is like such a Gail, like an old school like Gail Weathers thing to say, but it's just like she's like, I'm here with like breaking news where we've just come to like. You know, I flew all the way from, like, I guess, is she in New York or...
She's in New York. That's where they were living.
Yeah, just like, you know, I just came here, like, all the way to Woodsboro, like, across the country, and, like, I'm now in front of, like, how fast did they get there? It was just one of those...
Yeah, that's a long flight, but she must have like left, like booked a plane, like on the phone driving to the airport, like literally, like, you know, but or had somebody do it for her. She has assistants. I'm sure they did it for her.
She has spies in Woodsboro that are like, it's like, if anything happens, let me, like, the moment they're like Judy Hicks is dead, fuck it, I need to book like they have their own private like plane,
or even just from the text that he sent her.
Oh, so he already went, like, okay, that makes a little bit more sense.
I think the second she got that text, she left.
I just thought it was funny that she was already like down to business, like before like Dewey could even look back. She was already giving her report.
That is funny, but also that could be, you criticize the editing, and that could be like, because I know that's one of the areas where they had a deleted scene. Which I finally watched, like for one of these pods. Like I watched it and I found out they were like, what was it, like 2.5 minutes?
I believe there was 3 deleted scenes in total.
Yeah, and they were very, very small. Like they weren't even scenes; they were sections of scenes that were
snippets
ripped out. Yes,
I think that the one you're talking about, the Mindy one, where Mindy was just like randomly there, and I don't even think it was deleted. Like it seemed like more of an alternate take. Because Sam, it's like, well, I think it was in place of like the Richie phone call, because what happens is Gail goes and she starts to talk to Dewey, and then in the movie it cuts to Sam calling Richie, and he's at the motel, and then that's when she sees the officer who's left his post watching Tara, that she runs over to him. But in the deleted scene, what it shows is like Sam is just like there. And then she looks over and sees Mindy, who's just kind of like casually leaning against the van. And she's just like, Mindy, what are you doing here? And it was almost like accusatory. It was like kind of like...
Yeah.
And I'm glad that they took this out, because it wasn't... like if they were trying to pose Mindy as a suspect, it was like stupid, because they're like, how did you get here so fast? And she's like, I followed the sirens. And it's just like, weren't you all just like at the fucking... house? Like, it's just like, all right, meeting's over, let's go, I gotta drive my car around town because that's what I do. So that scene definitely, like that scene was I don't even know why that was written, but I'm glad it wasn't there. But I liked the other scene. There's two of them that kind of like lead into each other, and it's like Dewey had an earlier introduction into the movie, and I guess ultimately they took it out because they wanted his first introduction to be in the trailer, and I think that was a mistake because I liked the fact that we were first seeing Dewey, who was just kind of like, arguably, like this is him in even worse shape than we see him in the trailer, just like waking up and that, but just like we see him in the bar drinking. But I liked that because it had more Kyle Gallner, like we got more Vince stuff in the bar because that is a character that was completely underused, and I don't know if I can forgive that. But we did see him, kind of like, at least it established not necessarily a relationship between him and the other characters, but at least
they
like
know him.
Familiarity. They know who he is. He's like the former sheriff. He's like now the town drunk or whatever, however you want to posture him in this new movie. And he's sort of like, it shows that, he's down on his luck, but he's still got it because he's able to get a hit in on Vince because like, they have a little brawl, and it coincides with the scene where Vince and Chad have their little confrontation before they're kicked out of the bar. And then the follow-up scene to that, which I also really like because it gives us more Judy, because Judy is very underused in this movie. And it's also, again, it's sort of like there was so much to those characters as well, like Judy and Dewey in 4 that was never really kind of followed through with. Because I guess she had a thing for him or whatever, and I don't know if that like has now evolved into a friendship or a mutual respect or whatever. Yeah. But that's how it was played out in this scene where she's just kind of like, I could really use your help here. Yeah. And again, it made, because I don't really necessarily like Judy all that much, but I like Judy because he likes Judy, and it's one of those things where just like I at least as brief as that scene was, it was nice to just see them together again. Like it made sense like when I found out that Judy's coming back to the movie or for this movie, because I just feel like it's kind of been a trend where it's just like you have a surviving character from a movie. Like Cotton obviously came back for 3, but Joel didn't come back. And then in the survivor outside of the trio in 3 was Mark, who didn't come back in 4 or 5 other than name. So I didn't expect Judy to come back for 5, like after her like finale, like wear the vest, save the chest, or that shit. Like I just thought like, oh, she's just like the 4th survivor who's gonna disappear forever. So like when I found out that she was coming back, I just like, okay, this is interesting. Like I wonder how that will play into like the Dewey Gale stuff, because there's obviously tension there. So it was just nice that scene existed, and I wish that they had kept that stuff in.
I also love the fact that because Judy's not my like favorite character or anything like that. I love Marley Shelton so much more than I love Judy, but I do love the fact that there was an extra moment to kind of like see her softer side, aside from just like her interaction with her son, because I did get that, but seeing her be kind of like seem like the only cop left in Woodsboro who still believes in Dewey and who still wants to see him kind of like realize his potential. Like who else is she going to turn to in a moment? I think she has a line about like nobody has more direct contact or experience with Ghostface than you do, and he says, there are 2 more or something like that. And I'm like, Gail and Sid, we're right with it. I mean, that would have been that's some fan servicey shit that I think only bulks up the emotionality of the film and also still like rewards you for loving these characters as long as you have.
But I hate the way
I like it more than the lemon squares.
I hate the way that she kind of is introduced into this movie, because she's kind of like, she's brought back in like a very antagonistic way. Like she's like, we see her interactions with Sam, and obviously like Sam is still a character that we don't know, like we're following her story, but for all intents and purposes, we are on her side here, and we're seeing Judy, who's, just being kind of an asshole with her, like, why don't we step outside? Like just the authoritative thorn in her side, just be like, maybe you should leave town and let the people who actually care about this place do all the work, and so so it just makes her seem like very, very unsympathetic, very kind of like in the way, like she and inept, like she doesn't know what she's doing, and she's just kind of like creating more problems, but like kind of like projecting that onto Sam. So that's why I think that the scene with Dewey was necessary, because it does present a softer side of her, and it does warrant her returning, which is like, you know, if returning characters are coming back, I want to see them engage with each other, because all we see here is like the scene with her in the hospital, and then with her ultimate demise, and I guess like the brief like tip of the hat, you know, when she's outside of the school in front of the school bus there.
Right. That said, I do like the fact that, because I did have to wonder, I was like, wow, Judy's getting awful snippety. She's talking like a Karen or something. And then I realized when Sam and Gail compare notes and basically just kind of like, yeah, well, she didn't really like me either. And I'm like, oh, she didn't. Oh, okay, because you were the one she talked to like that in script form.
And that's another
so that was
comparison
nice.
That as why earlier when I said that Sam was more alike to Gail than Sam to Sydney.
Totally.
Yeah.
I did want to ask you something technical, because I don't know. I don't pay enough attention, and I don't have a good enough memory to know if this is true. And it feels like something that people would jump on who have brains like yours. The line, Sydney's in every movie except the last one, when they're talking about Stab. Is that true? Because it feels like it's not.
I'm so glad that you brought this up, because I was trying to like find a way to segue into Stab territory here, because this is a huge point of contention for me. This is part of the writing that I really fucking hate about this movie. And an argument, again, that I see brought up on the internet of just people presenting facts that aren't really fact, but more so just like thought, or just like their assumption of how things work, or just like legalities of things. Because for all intents and purposes, here's the Stab franchise. You have Stab 1, which is the Heather Graham, like the one that's seen in Scream 2. And this movie came out based on the Gale Weathers book, which is totally like plausible, because it's based on true events. Like if something happens in real life, a movie can be made, and there, you know, you don't have to get people to sign off on it. Like no one needs to sign a release. There's no, like, nobody has any like ownership of the story of their life. So because of that, you know, if Sydney the character is attacked by a Ghostface killer and all this shit happens, a studio can absolutely go ahead and make a movie about that. And they can, as long as they stick to whatever the basic story is, and not take too many creative liberties, even though we do see there's a lot of biopics out there where they do take creative liberties. But even then, like, it's very hard for the person or the celebrity or whatever to legally fight that and say, like, they misrepresented me, because it could still fall within the line of, like, it's based on a true story. So Scream 1 and 2, the events of Scream 1 and 2 can absolutely be made into Stab 1 and Stab 2, and Sydney has no control over that at all. None whatsoever. With Scream 3, and this is where things get complicated, because Scream 3 in that movie, and look, you're just loving this, but the movie that they're making is called Stab 3 Return to Woodsboro, which is based on a completely fictional premise. There might be, it seems like there's like flashbacks to the Maureen murder or whatever, but it's a new story, like whatever is like happening in the present day. We don't know what that movie's about. It never got made, because the Stab 3 eventually turned out to be Scream 3. Like the story with Roman and Sydney, right?
Yeah.
You're following that to that point. Okay.
I'm following.
So in Scream 3, at the beginning of Scream 3, we see Sydney, like, she's living on her own in the Topanga Canyon or wherever. She's got her own house. My headcanon, my logic is that she like the studio approached her and just like, we want to make a third movie. This is going to be fictionalized. We want to write about you. How much do we need to pay you that you can sign this release and let us make this movie where we use you as a character? And she's at that point in her life, after everything that happened in Scream 2 of like, you know, Mickey gaslighting her and all that she's like, I want to hide. I want to like disappear off the grid. I'm going to use a fake identity. This is exactly what I need. The money from this that I can get away and not be found by a killer. That's the whole part of like the beginning of Scream 3, where she says to her dad, like, psychos can't find or kill what they can't find. That's how I reasoned that. In Scream 4, at the beginning of Scream 4, there's a conversation between Jenny and Marnie when they're sitting on the sofa, and Jenny's talking about like Stab 5 deals with time travel, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
And Marnie has no idea about any of the movies, and she's just like, they're like, I thought you said these were based on like Woodsboro, and Jenny's like, well, the first 3 are the Sidney Prescott story, but after that, she threatened to sue the studio, so they couldn't make movies about her anymore, so they had to start making stuff up. Hence the Stab 5 having to do with time travel and et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So for all intents and purposes, Sidney Prescott is not a character in any more movies. She signed that release for them to make Stab 3 Return to Woodsboro. That movie never existed because the director and all the cast were killed. And then they eventually were just like, well, real life shit happened that we can make a movie about that instead. And that was like Scream 3, Stab 3. So from that point on, because we know in Scream 4 at the beginning that there were already 7 movies. So they made 4 more movies. Yes. And in none of those movies was Sidney a character. That was established by Jenny. And people argue, this is what the argument is that I've heard, that I just roll my eyes at. It's just like, well, they said that, you know, they couldn't use her story. It didn't say that they still couldn't use her as a character. And that is like the complete opposite of how the legal system works, because it's not the story. Like I said, you don't own the story to your life. But you do own your personality rights. You own the rights to you as a character. Right. And if they're taking, if the studio took Sidney Prescott and just like, let's make a movie where Sidney Prescott goes and robs a bank and then like flees to Mexico. And then Sidney's just like, I don't like that. I don't like how you've presented me as a bank robber. I'm going to sue you for millions of dollars. And then she would win that. So no, you cannot fucking just like, okay, well, we'll just make a movie about Sidney Prescott. So for all intents and purposes, Sidney is not in Stab 4, 5, 6, or 7. It never happened. That's what Jenny and Marnie were talking about. And even in the deleted scene at the fountain, when Kirby says Sidney hasn't been in the franchise since Stab 3, even though people are like, well, it was deleted, it's not canon. It's just like, it doesn't matter. That is the intent of that whole conversation that Jenny and Marnie had. So that's my fucking problem with the Stab, anything to do with Stab in this movie, because the writers didn't even like pay attention or, you know, look at like what has actually been established continuity wise, because then they wouldn't have said like Sidney has been a character in every movie except for the last one, because that's not true.
Right. Okay. And that's also, again, probably justified, again, this, and I think this is a case of like lazy writing kind of justifying itself by the joke that Richie says later when he's streaming. He becomes a streaming machine. He says, if you ask me, this whole franchise goes off the rails with part 5. And I'm like, oh, and we're watching part 5. So I think that if there's any argument to be made in defense of like their ineptitude as writers and their lack of continuity or their regard for canon, then it's probably
and then the other instance is when in the scene that the requel scene, when they're like, oh, well, you know, you and I are fucked because we're related to Randy, and then Wes says, Jesus, my mother was a character in one of those movies, and it's just no, she wasn't, because there was 7 Stab movies at the time that the events of Scream 4 took place. And we know by virtue of like what is established in this script that Stab 8 or Stab
has nothing to do with
anything else that came before it. And the fact that if it's not, they can't take Judy as a character and put her in this movie, because then Judy Hicks, the character, can be like, I don't want to be in this movie. You can't, like, I'm going to sue you for putting me in this movie. So there's absolutely no way that any of that could have happened. So again, it's just lazy writing. It's just like, it's that.
Or maybe that's how she makes the big bucks, to be able to afford sushi every day.
But then that also, I mean, funny, but then that contradicts the statement of just like saying that like nobody, it's all new characters in the Ryan Johnson stab. So
it really does go off the rails in part 5 then.
So,
all right.
I mean, but if that's how they're going to justify their lazy writing is that like, oh, it was all meta. It was like meta jokes. Then that just annoys me. Because I think like the thing is like when this movie was announced, I think like what we heard about it, or at least like how it was touted, is that this wasn't going to be meta at all. Because we'd already seen, like with Scream 4, we're just like kind of like, that was like meta overload. Like the movies just got more and more meta as they went along. And it just felt like we're going for a more serious tone here. And not to say that the tone wasn't more serious, but it's just like we're not going to be meta in the way that we were before. And then like, lo and behold, this is the most meta. Like, it's just like too meta, if you ask me.
One meta too far.
I did like seeing the extension of the Stab film, at least like showing the Randy stuff later on. And I do kind of appreciate the fact that we get at the beginning of like Tara going through the credits, and we see all of the other actors who are now officially canonized as playing in Stab. So we know that Vince Vaughn is Stumacher. We know that I think it was who played Principal Himbry? Oh, but Alicia Silverstone plays Tatum. Those two I know for sure. So yeah, we did get more of the cast, and they even had that, like they showed Jennifer Jolie played Gale Weathers.
Right.
So
I remember
that. So
that was
all
great.
all my heart needs now is if you want to do more Stab, just get Parker Posey. If you have to put your budget towards one cameo, Parker Posey. You will make so many people happy. You will make more people happy than you'll make people unhappy with that.
That's true. That is true. I wholeheartedly agree. If somebody's unhappy by the presence of Jennifer Jolie in any kind of flashbacks or footage, then I don't know what to say.
I would even like, or like, you know how like the old screen, like the DVD box set of the trilogy had like the outtakes and stuff. Even if like a character was like had it on and it was just like the outtakes, and it's just Jennifer Jolie playing Gale, but just like the outtakes and just being like, I can get this. I can get in her mind. Just give me a minute.
Oh my God. Like her audition, her deleted scene audition monologue for Waiting for Guffman, where she puts on her character glasses and shakes out her hair and goes, and now I'm in character, and then goes in and delivers her speech. That would have been great. Yeah.
But I need to see the streaks.
Yeah.
That's what I want to see.
I'll settle for any hairdo at this point, but that would be great. Oh well, it has to be the streaks because she didn't live past, or I mean, if we found out that she caught a limb or somehow survived her wounds at the end, but we know she didn't because her face is there in the fucking thing in the box set with the kills
and the new poster of just like the subway system for the new Scream movie that basically shows like every dead character, which I'm so angry about because they've labeled Mrs. Loomis as Debbie Loomis, which I just like. I don't want to blame that on the writers though, because that might be Paramount marketing, but it's just like.
But she was Debbie Salt.
She was Debbie Salt or Mrs. Loomis. According to the script, Nancy Loomis, it's an homage to the actress from Halloween, but it's still like one of those things, like that's an oversight. I don't know who's responsible for that. They even like called, and I was all on Twitter about this too, tweeting away. Kenny, like the cameraman in the first movie, whose last name has always been Jones, even though Scream 2 Joel's last name is also Jones, but they changed it to Brown. Or like Paramount did with like the new movie, and it's just like, no, that's the actor's last name, W. Earl Brown.
Oh God.
So it's just like, it's things like that, like, because I just think back to like Paramount and like their reign of having like the Friday the 13th franchise, which they disrespected completely. And I just feel like, are you going to do that to another franchise where just like, you're going to hold on to it and allow it to make you money, but you're not going to respect it in any fucking way, shape, or form, and then discard it when it's no longer of any use to you? Is that...
I actually wonder if there's some kind of like person in an office somewhere who's just kind of like bored and goes like, hey, you know what I think would piss off like the diehard fans? And then they just kind of, get this wrong, get that wrong, because somebody's going to notice.
Well,
it. Somebody's going to notice.
There is an Easter egg on the poster of just because it's like each character is like a train station, and there's a Kirby one, but it has an X through it. It's like a red dot and an X through it saying closed, because obviously she survived. She's in the new movie. Yeah. But then there's the stew station is off white, like it's got a pink hue to it, whereas everyone else's dot is white. So it's just like, okay, clearly they know that people are obsessed with the idea that he might come back. So they're like, this is our way to like manipulate and bait people. So people are like going insane right now, thinking that like, oh, it means this for sure means that Stu's coming back. It's just like, no, you're being duped. No, if he does come back, it's just like, okay, whatever. But I mean, like, it makes no sense for him to come back, because literally like every character that has any sort of connection to him is either dead or not in this movie. Like him and Gale had like one exchange. Like Sydney would be the appropriate person to have, or even Dewey, because Dewey has more of a like an emotional connection to like the person who is responsible for killing his sister, whether it be directly or indirectly. It might be cool to see him
interact with Sam, though. Not that they know each other, but just for the thrill of seeing, the great Billy Loomis's daughter like interact with Stu. The only way they could bring him back at this point, like why would he wait this long to come back, is if he was in a coma the whole time. That is full on soap opera though. If he was in a coma all these years and then just woke up, and then came back, and I
do think that if there was, for whatever reason, a thing where they had to bring him back. First of all, I think that it's more appropriate to like save that for a chapter where Sydney is present, because I think that would mean more for her. But I would like to see him take on more of a Cotton Weary Scream 2 role, where it's just like, here's this like ex-con who is just like, maybe they got out like early on parole, whatever reason they want to fabricate for why he's not in prison for, everything that he was responsible for in that first movie. But, if he's out now and he's kind of like, I'm a good guy now, but then can like kind of like linger in the wings and be this like suspect, and just like, can we trust him? Can't we? And we don't know what the situation is with him. That's the only thing that I'll accept. And even then, that's a big if,
No, because I want them to go full on off. They're already off the rails, so just go full hog. Whole hog is the term. I know. And just have him like create a cult of Ghostface. In fact, I want that to be the name of the movie. Scream, Cult of Ghostface. And I just want him on a throne that's like made out of like the shiny black, glittery cape, like material. And then I want him to just have like a kingdom of rats because he's living in the subway. And that's why there's that little subway stop with his dot on it, because he's the king of the underworld of Manhattan.
I hope nobody's believing you right now, because this is...
I hope so too. No, I hope people believe me and DM me and go, you're fucking crazy. But anyway, I do have to say there are some good laughs in this movie though that I have. Like one of them, it's not even like a jokey joke laugh, but it's right after I'm already crying over losing Dewey still. I honestly could have, like, in the movie theater the first time it happened, could have paused the scene where Gail is just sitting there before Sam walks up and talks to her, and then before Sid's entrance. I could have just sat there and just sobbed for like a good 10 minutes. But anyway, now I just cry through it. But as I'm crying through it, it still sets up like that exchange between Tara and Sam where Tara's like, I blame you for leaving me too. And Sam says, that's never going to happen again. I'm going, oh, they're making out. I'm still crying. Yeah. But what I love is the fact that Sam tells her, you were so high right now. She's like, I am so high right now. I don't know. It's so, because it's so spontaneous. It feels like it could have even been improv. Yeah. And it's just, and it gives me like, again, that relationship almost accidentally, like, here, by the way, this is who these two sisters are when they're cool with each other. Like, this is this is who you want to follow. And it's like, you're exactly right. That's who I want to follow. So I love that. I love the "I'll be right back" that Richie says before he goes down the steps, and then he's just gonna go to Mindy. I mean, there's all these little moments. Like, I love a lot of Mindy's shit. That's the thing. From Act 3, I don't have a problem with the party and everything, but I gotta say, everything that follows Welcome to Act 3, I am totally down with. And I know you and I probably differ there. Everything that follows the gunshot, like Welcome to Act 3, everything that follows, I am just like, I am in this. So
okay. Well, I'll just since you bring up the live kill as it were, maybe we'll just address this now, and then if there's nothing else, we can get to the cherry picker. But I always like, I don't like that kill, because I feel like, again, that's like it works well the first time as like a shock, moment. But I hate, like, this movie has a very low body count for one, and I hate the fact that, like, we have a killer using a gun in this movie. And not that it hasn't been done before, obviously, like, because we had Mickey shoot Derek, but I feel like that moment is preceded by, like, such a great kind of standoff of just boyfriend killer, like, what's, who do we believe here? Whereas, like, in this situation, it's just like, oh, we're just gonna, like, again, it's like Amber is all about sensationalism, and it's just like, welcome to Act 3 or whatever the fuck she says, and I don't like it, and I just think it's tacky, and it's like it robbed us of like a better death scene or maybe some sort of set piece, because Liv is another character that is like so pointless to this movie that it's like that was her only purpose, and it bothers me even more that, like, her brains are on the wall there, and then in the next the same shot when they're running into the kitchen, the wall is clean, there's no body on the floor. So just like really, come on. Like, I know that maybe you were on a tight schedule or whatever, but it, like, those are things that are just like, I know that, like, and I don't want to say this to be critical of Radio Silence, because I do respect them, but it's just like one of those things where just like, come on, like, let's not like cut corners here. Like, Wes Craven had such an eye for detail that, like, that's what I respect about the first 4 movies so much, that they're everything, he really thought of everything, to the point where I watched those first 4 movies, like, more so like the first one, but I'm always finding new things. Like, even after our conversation or episode on 4, I can watch through that and just like, oh, I never noticed that before. Whereas this one, and why I say it's not as rewatchable, is because everything, it's like what you see is what you get. Everything is kind of there. There is nothing like to really pick apart after that. So that's kind of like my mindset of why it's the least rewatchable for me.
Right, and that's not my experience as previously established. But but because the thing is that what I like about, I mean, I don't like the presence of guns in any of these movies, obviously, but I do like that it kind of clues me into where this character is at whenever any Ghostface wields a gun, and like where they're at and what their intent is, because it's a very different kill with a gun versus with a knife. And there's something, I don't know, I kind of embrace about, again, like Amber's cowardice, because it's like the quickest way to assume power in a room, if you're not afraid of like a body count. And it just lets me know, like, oh, okay, so yeah, you just want to do everything to take like the easiest route possible. Like, it's not even really about like the bloodlust for you or the intimacy of like the knife going into like a nice soft belly and everything like that. Like, thank God you killed Dewey right, in quotes. But also, you're just being, again, reckless and sloppy, which is something I really embrace about that character as a killer. I like the fact that it seems to be in continuity with everything else that I kind of like consider about that character, especially in the third act. And I really, go.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, we're running like really late here. This is a long episode.
Yeah, we are.
Like the last one. I guess we're just making up for lost time of taking a week off. But do you want to kind of like just your final whatever you wanted to say, and then we'll get to the
Sure.
cherry picker. Okay, cool.
Sure. One of my favorite exchanges the whole movie is just that question when Richie asks Sam, how well do you really know her, talking about Tara. And I love just watching Tara go, better than I know you. And then for me, I don't know, just the whole toxic fandom angle I'm totally on board with.
Yeah.
But what I really get exhilarated by is watching every time, just seeing Sam own her lineage, as it were. you know, this thing that she's been afraid of. You know, all of a sudden she's allowing her apparition of her father to goad her on, and she's just like embracing this thing that she's been so afraid of. And the fact that she knows she's owning it, and that I get to watch it, and I get to watch this little bitch Richie sit there and be like, I am clapping.
My ending.
Yes, I am clapping over my head, like just going, yeah.
And she stabs him like what, 22 or 23 times. I think
however many, it's amazing.
I think
it's
that like
amazing.
Sam is going. I really hope that people turn around on her in 6, and she's able to reel that fan base back in, because I think that this is a movie that people are hopefully go back and kind of reappraise her as a final girl, because we've criticized final girls before who throw the knife down, right? And here's a character, and everyone's just like, no, they shouldn't be throwing the knife down, they should be fighting back. And here's a character who's doing exactly that, but yet here we are as like a fan base criticizing her for it's like nothing can be perfect. Like if we don't like you for this, we don't like you for that. So I think that Sam is like really kind of a badass character, and I think that that's why I like that she's kind of taken on the mantle of the new final girl, we'll say. And then I guess also I just in terms of Sydney and Gail, I just love how they're on the back of the ambulance there with like blankets on. Like it's just like they're like, we're fine, don't worry about us.
We're just hanging out. We've been here before. We will probably be here again. It's just what we do. I love that.
And and
also just sorry.
Oh no! Also, just the Gail saying like it's almost her coming full circle of just being like, I know what I'm not going to write about. Just like this, and that's why I hope that this was the end of Stab. Like I have a really bad feeling that they're going to continue with the Stab shit in like 6 and onward. But I mean, this was the perfect opportunity to kind of like kibosh that and just be like, no more Stab. Let's put an end to Stab. So other than
that's one thing that I'm.
One thing that what I said, other than the hopeful Jennifer Jolie scene.
Of course.
Yeah.
But aside from that, like, because also that's not a new Stab. That's a reference to like an old like Stab that was already made. So I get that. But that's the thing that I'm curious about, and I don't need to hear anything from you, but I'm really anxious to see in the theater and experience is like, I understand the Manhattan of it all coming up in Screevy, but I want to know and I experience it in the theater. I want to know what is the angle here? Because we had like the toxic fandom and the requels for this movie. We had the reboot era and the don't fuck with the original of it all, of and also the social media influencer bullshit of Screforum. Scream 3 Hollywood, the like going full Stab, and then Scream 2 was sequels, and the first movie was the first movie. So I am anxious to find out when I sit down for Screevy, just to find out like, so what's the angle here? What trend? And
what's the MO?
And also what's the motive? Yeah, what's going to be the MO of the killer? Like, what is the motive to like move to Manhattan and do it there?
The modus
so I like all that.
operandi, because that's different from the motive.
Yeah. Yes.
Sorry. I agree.
The mode of approach and
what will be the purpose of 6? Okay, let's get to the cherry picker.
It's not like we killed people on purpose.
All right, first order of business. We need a cherry on top. Are we on the same page?
I think we are. Who are you thinking?
As little as she is in the movie, I think this is such a like huge chapter for Sydney, just in terms of like, I mean, I love the
nothing but beams of light.
Yeah, like I love the new cast and everything.
Yeah.
But I just feel like with Jenna, great performance, but she's just not in it enough. And I feel with Sam, there's still like a lot of growing pains. Like, you know, as much as I love her, we need
more.
Yeah. And the twins aren't in it enough either. Although I love them.
Right.
So okay, Sydney and Gail. Sorry, I don't want to discount Gail, but like she's great as well. But Sydney.
Yeah,
Okay.
Sydney. Okay, Sydney.
Okay. Thank God. Last week, we asked you who deserves to die the most in Friday the 13th, Part 2. I nominated Deputy Winslow, and you nominated Ted Bowen. And across Patreon, Instagram, and YouTube, the vote came to 276 for Winslow versus 483 for Ted.
Oh my God.
I want to point out something before I read the comments here, because we did, like on the old podcast that was just on my Patreon, that was like a year and a half ago, because we did it in the summer of 2021, because we did all the Friday the 13th, and that was kind of the genesis of the cherry picker. Like we had a different thing for like the vote before, but this was like really like the start of like who deserved to die the most. And I know for part 1, our nominations were the same as what they were in the official one we did for like this podcast, which was I voted or I nominated Ned, you nominated Steve Christie, and I won that one. But this time around, you won that one. And then we had the same nominations for part 2 as well, where I nominated Winslow and you nominated Ted, and I also won that. So it's like, it's weird that it's now like shifted, even though it's the same characters.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
the crowd is growing.
Yeah.
The audience.
So
I want to hear what they say though.
Okay. Luke L says Ted is the smartest character in any slasher ever by simply avoiding the conflict. Howell Puns. I don't remember this movie, but the image you used of Ted incited something in me that made me think, yes, kill that guy. And that's obviously the image where he's the welcome to God's country.
Right, yeah.
Blue Box 87 says, while Ted might seem like the obvious choice, Deputy Winslow gets my vote. I mean, he could barely keep up running after Jason, and when he found his shack, he just waltzed in like, oh cool, a murder house. Rob Rangel, I voted Ted. Ted surviving is still one of the most baffling things in the Friday the 13th series because he's prime victim material, and yet he never interacted with Jason or the Hara. I said it like that because it's in quotation, so I don't know
that's wonderful.
if that's what Rob meant, but Rachel Sullivan says, lucky for Ted that he found those after hours places. Very lucky. The first time I saw that movie, I was shocked that he did not get it. Johnny Pendergast says Ted is a legend.
Oh dear.
Sucked says Ted because his pranks were not appreciated in this already terrifying situation, and he reminded me of Eugene Horowitz from Hey Arnold. I'm trying to remember which character Eugene Horowitz was.
I didn't watch it often enough. I think it was on every now and then. That's more my sister's generation.
I remember Helga Pataki and I think Gerald was the best friend.
I don't even know names. No. Good for you.
Yeah. Jeremy Huff. I never understood why Ted just completely disappeared. As the practical joker, he was prime victim material.
Thank you.
ATG NAT Podcast says, we really didn't know much about the deputy other than he was concerned for the safety of all the humans training to be counselors. Was he, though? Was he concerned, or was he just, did he have a power trip,
I mean, he seemed to kind of be like Paul's little winged monkey, because wasn't he almost kind of like flanking him when he was like giving the speech to all of the counselors? Wasn't he just kind of like alongside him as opposed to sitting among the lessers,
the deputy?
Maybe he had some pull. No, not the deputy. I'm sorry. I'm thinking about Ted.
Ted. Yeah.
I'm
We're
tired.
talking about the deputy.
Okay, sorry about
he
that.
is a kind of a winged monkey, though.
He
Thomas
is too.
Baker says, my choice would have been for Scott. Also, the actor who played Ted in this movie, he was in Christine. He certainly was. We talked about that, yeah.
He doesn't die good.
He doesn't die good, but he dies, just not in this one.
Yeah.
PJ Hunt, so did Muffin the dog survive or not? Because Ginny's memory of him was in a dream sequence. I think Muffin's dead.
And right. I like to believe Muffin survived. So there you go.
M85 says deputy put himself in danger pursuing Jason alone like that. Braven Burris says Ted did the impossible. Slasher Rules says he was supposed to die. Good for him for getting his freak on versus being stabbed by Jason. Elliot from Orlando says Ted stayed in public surrounded by people and survived. Deputy Winslow got it because he chased Jason into the woods. I'm not holding it against Ted that he just lucked out and made a better choice inadvertently. AJ,
but he did more than that. Anyway, go on.
AJ Stanley says, why is Ted getting the most votes? He was cool and avoided death. Yeah.
No. Not cool, buddy. All right. Yeah. Whatever.
Green Koopa says, hammer time? Okay.
Right.
Oh, because he gets the hammer in the head. Winslow. Yeah, I get it now.
Okay, so
yeah,
he voted
cool.
for Winslow.
Yeah, fun. Binks, why Ted? He's the smart one who stayed out drinking.
Oh my God.
It's like he knew that everyone was just like, they're all going back to get slaughtered. I'm gonna stay here.
Like again, final boy by default. Like it's not like he was cunning,
but not even final because he didn't make it to the end. You know, he could have been like the Joel of Scream 2 showing up at the end when Ginny was being loaded into the ambulance and being like, just like old times, you know, like whatever the fuck. Sean Flanagan says, I almost always end up voting for the lowest vote getter. One day I'll be on the right side of history. Oh. Desiree Perez. I voted Ted because he was so annoying and so was his jokes. LOL. He shouldn't have survived. Kira Wood says the deputy deserves to die for being really stupid, chasing Jason in the woods alone that far and leaving the door to his cop car open. Why is Ted an option? He was smart enough to stay and not get killed.
Oh, Jesus. It wasn't smart. But anyway, go on.
It was just coincidence.
People keep calling him smart.
Green Hair 77 says, Scott is my real vote. What's with all this Scott hate? Well, like, that's at least two. But although he gets it with a bill hook, stealing women's clothes and slingshotting their butts is gross. Ted is harmless and the deputy was right to scoot people out of there.
I wouldn't say Ted is harmless, but okay.
Megan Olson says, never seen it, but Ted Bowen just looks like he's the worst.
Also, when you scare... I'm sorry, I'm stuck on that harmless thing, because I'm like, when you scare people around an open campfire, that's not harmless. Anyway,
This is like the trees mom debate, where it's just like, someone's going to get hurt, they're going to fall in the fire. Okay, last comment. Rashim says, Deputy Winslow deserved to get killed. Will you guys be bringing back the trivia for Instagram? Not anytime soon. I feel like it was a lot of work. Like it's a lot of busy work. But keep looking at Instagram because we are interactive on there.
Yeah, but keep listening to the pod for us to make our cases. Like,
yeah. All right, sir, you have first pick here.
Okay, I'm probably not going to win because I'm sure you're going to pick somebody who annoys people more en masse than mine. But I have to vote my conscience and my heart. There is one. It was so incredibly clear while I was revisiting this movie because we haven't talked much about this character. Because this character is not that interesting and just rubs me the wrong way, even as a red herring. Yeah. And that's Liv McKenzie. I don't like Liv. I don't know if it's the fact that she paints her eyelids basically silver, so when she shuts her eyes it looks like she's kind of like possessed or something with her eyes still open with no pupils. I don't know if it's the fact that she is kind of like, see, all the criticisms you have for Amber, I feel like I might be able to kind of like lift and drop on Liv, because she is also a loose cannon, but not an interesting one. She just feels nasty and dangerous and unpredictable, and but not interesting. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like there's nothing. She just feels like, oh my gosh, get away from me. Like when when she starts intimidating Mindy and everything like that, I'm just kind of like, Mindy is the audience or she's me at that particular moment. She's just kind of like, do you think that I could take a knife and put it in? And it's just like, well, I do now. I mean, yeah, you're not really doing much. I'm like, you don't think I'm interesting? I'm like, no, you're not. So, and also, I'm probably just like a little jealous of the fact that she gets to like make out with Mason Gooding. So I'm gonna kill her. Yeah. she died anyway, but she deserved to die. She should have died a lot earlier. That would have been better.
I don't know if I said this, but yeah, she didn't need to be in the movie. Like there was no reason for that character existing.
One more red herring. That was it.
She wasn't even a red herring, because that scene was of absolutely no like. Her character is of no consequence to anything in this movie other than that surprise moment. But it's even that red herring moment. It's just like, I'll meet up with you guys later. It's just like that was never revisited. Like that's another case of bad writing there, of just like, oh, let's throw in this red herring. Like I think like at least the Vince character, they could have got so much more mileage out of him as a red herring. But I agree. And also like she's very I don't want to like say this is another case of like the actor or anything, but I just found her very inconsistent, like her characterization. Like every scene she was in, she seemed to be playing a different character, or she was playing it a different way.
That's the thing, is she wasn't even a character. She was just kind of like a series of characteristics, and never did I was never interested in going beyond those and being like, because I was like, I just remember thinking in the theater, if she's the killer, I quit. Because that would have been the least interesting thing you could do.
That would have been even
more. And also I think it makes Chad less interesting, the fact that he's into her. Like, what are you doing, Chad? Come on.
I really hope
you're
that
Mason Gooding.
I hope that he gets, because he deserved a lot better, just in terms of like being a character in this movie, that hopefully he's fleshed out a little bit more in 6. But I mean,
charming as fuck.
I mean, typically with these Scream movies, I've chosen a non-character in the past, and I know. The only one that I could think of that's a non-character is Deputy Vincent.
Okay.
I mean, I really hate Amber. I
know.
But I like, oh man. And I don't like, I'm going to go for Deputy Vincent.
You're staying true to your brand.
Because, I mean, at least Amber's like, she does provide that incompetent entertainment sort of thing. Like, I hate her. I'll take care of her later in other stuff. But yeah, Deputy Vincent, for just being probably the worst cop that we've seen in the franchise, because he's not even a character, at least like with the Adam Brody and Anthony Anderson in 4, we get something out of them. And this is just this guy. He's he's on his phone, he's eavesdropping, and he's not even like she catches him, or she makes eye contact and he quickly looks away. When you've been caught staring at someone. So there's that. And then the fact that he just leaves his post watching Tara, just it's just shitty work. And Judy even says I've got Deputy Vincent, he's going to be outside the door the whole time. And literally in that same scene, when after the conversation between the diary confession, when Sam goes out, he's not sitting in the chair anymore, so he's already gone.
There. No.
Yeah. So fuck that guy. He sucked. I'm gonna pick him as just to go for a non-character again, just to keep the tradition.
I can't wait to hear the wrath from people for why neither of us chose Amber, because I feel like that's the vitriol.
I also think that I also think it would have been more fun if you had chosen Richie and I chose Amber, because then that would have been kind of like a let's see who's like the.
But I like watching him. And
I
I don't, you know how I feel about Amber, so I'm not going to kill her.
Okay.
So I can't kill either of them in good conscience. I can't.
Anyway, you can vote your heart, vote your conscience. The poll will be up on Instagram. That is at the Cherry Picker Pod. So follow us there. You can also vote on YouTube. That is the Cherry Picker. Community tab, that's where you'll find that. So you can subscribe to us as well. If you're new to the Cherry Picker and you are just finding us for the first time and you are watching us on YouTube, you can also listen to us. The RSS feed link is in the descriptions down below. And if you're listening to us for the first time, go to YouTube and watch us there. Also, I do want to welcome some new Patreon supporters. So say hello to Melanie Gage, Hervé Q, Serena Schock, Danielle D, and Christopher Nicholson.
Hey, 5!
Hey.
Just like this movie.
Oh, wow.
Yay.
5 Cream. Welcome aboard.
5 Cream.
It's a good, so if you do support on Patreon, that is my Patreon, Zack Cherry, you will get early access to all of our episodes. Also, if you're supporting on the Freddy Krueger tier, you will get access to the Cherry Picker After Dark. That's our bonus episode, like the Final Girl rankings that you were talking about earlier. We just did Jawbreaker this last month, the movie Jawbreaker. This month we are doing Wild Things. So plenty more content to check out there. But social media, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram at EdwardIsTruth, all one word. And if you type that in on YouTube, you should find me. But the actual handle, I don't think I say it every episode, so it's at EdwardIsTruth9908, apparently. I don't even know, folks. But if you type in EdwardIsTruth, I should be there. What about you, Zack Cherry?
You can find me on YouTube. My channel is Zack Cherry, Z-A-C-K, or Z-A-C-K, Cherry. And you can also find me on Instagram. That's Retro Bitch Face, all one word. Twitter, ZackCherry8. But what do we got going on next week? Just to close this supersized episode out.
Oh, right. We
it's a new release coming up.
Oh, it's that one with the girl with that's gone viral where everybody's all and she's flipping.
Is she
and
a girl
shit,
or is she
she's a robot.
Yeah.
Right? She's M3gan.
Yeah, it's like Scriphorum, but M3gan.
Yeah, M3gan. That's what we're doing.
So that's what we're doing. So
that's the one.
Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening, and we will be